come around this curve, and there is a roadblock, a full-blown roadblock on both sides of the road, I might add. And here we are, like, a couple hundred yards away, and the last thing we could do is, they set it up this way on purpose, of course. We can't pull over. We can't turn around because there's a meridian in between the highways. There's no exit. This is it. And we have the hash not in our stash yet. This is just in a duffel bag in the back with a surfboard and our backpacks and all that stuff.
My guest today is Scott Gussin. He lost his mom when he was just 7 years old and grew up in New York before building a hash smuggling route that brought product from Morocco into the United States and had a 30-year run in the drug business. Today, he's revealing how it all worked and how it all came to an end.
I grew up in Portchester, New York, just over the Connecticut border, just south of Greenwich, Connecticut, United Hospital, and that's where I went to school, kindergarten and ninth grade, and lived there till I was about 18 or 19, then school for 2 years, and a couple of years in Massachusetts, and then California.
What was your upbringing like?
Well, good question. It was Leave It to Beaver and Andy Griffith, kind of normal up until 7 years old. And when I was 7, April 1960, my mom, who I was very tight with, unfortunately died from cancer. They didn't know anything about it at that point. And that's when the world went upside down. I lost a major figure in my life. And for the next 18 years, 20 years really, but I was out of the house by the time I was about 19. But for about the next 20 years, because my sister's 6 years younger, we had 18 different housekeepers that were trying to take the place of my mom. Some lasted a half a day, some a couple of months, and the longest one I think was about 5 years. So those were the mother figures.
Was your dad wealthy that they were housekeepers?
My dad was well-off middle class. He was commuting every day. Portchester is about a 40-minute train ride to Manhattan, and he was commuting doing the Monday through Friday, basically 8 to 5, 9 to 5 routine. And he worked for a variety of companies, Ethan Allen Furniture, Magnavox TV, RCA, and he was usually in marketing. So he was vice president of marketing for several of these companies.
Their headquarters, I think, is in Danbury.
Yeah.
Allen. Yeah. I always see it.
Yeah.
And they have the hotel next to it, too.
Exactly. And they had one of my worst jobs ever for 6 weeks. They had one of their plants up in Beecher Falls, Vermont. Beecher Falls is right next to New Hampshire and Canada. And during the summer, they have a skeleton crew. And my dad sent myself and my best friend at the time, I was 16, to go up and work at this factory. So for 6 weeks, I literally handed a Frenchman, the only English word he knew was block. We were building a 6-foot-high cement block wall. And my job was to hand him blocks all day. Block, hand him the block. I thought jail was more fun than that. But that was my job for 6 weeks. Horrible.
Now, how did all these women coming in and out of the house affect your upbringing?
Well, I don't think I realized the reality of I knew my mom was the way I knew it was we were visiting her in the hospital. And the last visit was they let us bring our pet dog. We had a poodle named Noodle. And even as a 7-year-old kid, I knew when we brought the dog up to her hospital room, I don't know how I knew it. I remember this visually, like it happened a week ago. I knew when I saw her and hugged her and all that, and she was in tears and all upset, that was probably going to be the last time I saw her. And sure enough, she passed away within 48 hours after that. And my dad took me to our neighborhood. I grew up in Portchester, middle-class area. It's now called Rye Brook because they didn't like the name Portchester for whatever reason. And he took me for a walk in the woods, sat me down, and he told me about it. And from then on, we had a housekeeper. Now, you can imagine my dad, working in the city, no female figure except my grandmother who lived 10 minutes away helping out. And so each one would come in, Now there was some that came in literally. One he found out within about 6 hours she could barely boil an egg, so she was gone. Some would come in and last a month or 2 months. Some would disappear in the middle of the night. A couple of real classics, starting with an Irish lady, Katie, who ended up bringing her daughter along and moved into the house. Her daughter was about 23, and she was a very hot 45 or something. I found out later. Now, I didn't find out this stuff for several years later. I think I was about 11 or 12 when she came in. They were running a brothel out of the house when my sister and I went to school. So from essentially 8:30 to 3 p.m., they were hookers. One of their best customers was my drum teacher. So those gals ran a brothel. My father found out, and they were gone, and they lasted about a year and a half with the daughter the whole time. There was another big, huge German lady. She weighed about 240 pounds, but solid as a rock. And what we didn't know, and I found out later, when I grew up, wasn't very religious, but my mom was Protestant. We went to church, I think, for Christmas or whatever. A couple of years after she died, my dad thought it would be a good idea to have some religion. He's a Russian Jew. His parents, my grandparents, escaped from Estonia back in, the World War I days, I think. And at any rate, he thought that we should be Reformed Jews, just to do like a religion thing. I had no problem with that. So I went to Sunday school. I studied to have my bar mitzvah. I had Gertrude, the German housekeeper, driving me to Sunday school. But here's what makes that really weird. We find out years later she was a member of the Nazi party, the underground Nazi party. So she's driving me to school. She also dated a cop who a few years later knew I was dealing weed at 15 and 16, but I had that connection, so he was cool with me. So we had some characters. Oh, one other one. She wore a nurse's outfit. My dad didn't have a specific outfit for them to wear, but she wore all white stockings, white bloomers. Out of the blue, we'd be playing outside as kids. The neighbors were over and everything. We had a big oak tree, about 50 foot tall in the backyard. And for whatever reason, she would climb way up in the tree and show the bloomers to the whole neighborhood and hang out in the tree for a half hour. So we had fun with the housekeepers. There was a lot of real wacky ones. One was an alcoholic. She borrowed money from my father, left in the middle of the night, and so on. So there was a story with all of them. Those are the standouts. So
how did you get into dealing weed at 15?
Well, my attitude and everything, I think, radically changed when I was 7. After my mom died, I was really tight with my grandmother, her mom. I loved my other grandparents, my dad's parents, but they lived up in Buffalo. She lived right in Rye, 10 minutes away. And she was the one that got me, and this goes back before my mom died, when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade. My grandmother took me to a store and bought me 200 fireballs. This was my first business. Remember the really red hot fireballs? Well, back in the day, in the late 50s, these things were really hot, and they were a penny a piece, and I took them to school and sold them for a nickel. And I liked that. I thought, okay, this is cool. And then when I was 14, I decided I wanted to smoke weed for the first time. And weed was really hush-hush, and there was very few people smoking weed at the time. And I found out from one of my best friends, he was also interested in smoking weed, but we had no idea how to get weed. Excuse me. So we asked around. It took us a long time. It took us about 4 or 5 weeks. One of our friend's older brothers claimed he could get us weed. And we bought a nickel bag, $5. We went up to the woods behind my friend's house, and we started smoking, and it was real nasty, and this isn't right. It tastes horrible. We dumped it out, and we realized we were smoking the same woods we were sitting in. They were leaves and sticks from the ground. So that wasn't the real deal. Then finally, about 4 months later, that same friend, he had a friend in the same apartment complex that sold. The best deal I ever got was a $5 nickel bag that was probably this big. It was probably, in today's market, a half an ounce, 14, 15 grams. It was black Chiba Chiba. It was the most potent weed to this day that I ever smoked. And his mom went to work every day. We had similarities. His dad died when he was 5. My mom died when I was 7. So we were best friends going through school. And we were 15, and we pulled out the corncob pipe and started smoking some of that weed. And before you knew it, we were riding bicycles upside down, eating everything in the kitchen. And I knew, it was almost like I had an epiphany or something. I knew, I can't even explain how, Ian, in my mind, that this was going to be a big part of my future. And it didn't take me long to figure out, okay, I have a good contact to get weed. I have some other friends. So as it went along, started off with nickel bags, ounces, pounds. And before you knew it, within the next year, I was dealing weed. And there was one other person that had a big influence. His name is Reuben. In the book, his name is Reuben. And Reuben lived in New York City. His parents were very wealthy, lived on Park Avenue, and they also had a 200-year-old house in Connecticut, in Old Greenwich, a really old, cool house. And this is kind of a funny story because one of my close friends, who was a known hash dealer and weed dealer, but something I might throw in there, back in those days, this was 68, 69, and that time frame, literally in the part of New York I grew up with, there was more kinds of hash than there were weed, which sounds bizarre, but there was 9, 10 different kinds of hash and 3 or 4 different kinds of weed, all of it being premier, high end. And my friend invited me down to visit Reuben in the city, and I was going to score a pound, which was the biggest amount I ever bought at that point. He was giving it to me on the front. I didn't have to pay any money. And I went into Reuben's and I met him, and I saw one of the most fantastic stashes I've ever seen. But granted, I was only 16 at the time. He had an antique desk, and he opened up a hidden drawer, and there was several oars about this big of this soft red Lebanese hash. You could bend this hash and it would touch ends without breaking. He also had a big vial of purple pills, LSD, and he had 10,000 in cash. Back in those days, 10 grand looked like $1 million. Wow, what a stash. We proceeded to smoke some hash, and it was the first time ever that I smoked real hash. It blew me away. He gave me the hash. He fronted me about 100 of the tabs of purple Owsley. This purple Owsley was the same stuff out from Northern California. He had a contact that was getting it right from Owsley himself. And so the Owsley, to give you an idea, he sold it to me for 75 cents. So I took the train back. I was stoned out of my mind, all excited, and I got rid of all that stuff, but I kept several tabs of that LSD and a big chunk of the hash, and that was my springboard. But I was selling this LSD to kids in the private school that I went to for 2 years in high school for like $5 to $10 a hit. So that's when I knew, hey, this job is right up my alley. I knew early on at 12 that I wasn't going to be like my dad, a 9 to 5 or commuting to the city. So I really went full bore, at 15, 16 years old, starting to sell predominantly hash, and then, of course, weed, when that made sense, and purple Owsley LSD. I experimented for about 2 years with the acid.
Can you break down the difference between hash and weed?
Yeah, because people these days, and else you're over 50, you're not going to get it, because ever since the late 70s, real hash in this country does not exist. In these, the stores, all the weed stores, whether it's on the East Coast, the West Coast has some of the best in California. They do have hash. People make their own hash, and they sell it for ridiculous prices, $50, $75 a gram. And it tastes kind of like hash, but on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 was the quality of hash we had back in the day, and back in the day, I mean the 60s and, up to the mid 70s, if that hash back then was a 10, the hash in the stores now today is maybe a 2.5, 3. But the main difference is that hash is a lot more potent even than the best pot. It also depends on what hash. For example, the heavier duty hashes is more knock you out, like incapacitate you, from countries like Nepal, where they had Nepalese temple balls, and they also had the fingers, super deadly. Some of that hash was opiated, so that helped knocking you out, obviously. Pakistan had good hash. Morocco, where I went to, really good blonde hash, several different levels. But the hash was a more one hit or two hits, heavy duty, and it would last even, one drag, one puff, one hit, whatever you want to call it. We used to call it hits back then, would last 4 or 5 hours, where one hit of weed was really good. But the levels of high, I guess the best way in layman's term, it would be like drinking shots of bourbon if it was hash, and a fine wine if it was weed. It was just that much stronger, 3, 4, 5 times stronger. So somebody that was used to smoking even the good weed back then, like the Acapulco Gold was premier, Panama Red, Colombian Wheels was very good back in the day. It was great. It would get you laughing, and it was a lot of fun and stuff like that. But it would last a few hours if you smoked, a couple of hits. But the hash would last a lot longer, and it was heavier. It was just a heavier kind of buzz for the most part. And it was more visual. I don't call hallucinations or something that, that are there that you see. But I call people, I think, are confused by that when they do psychedelics. I call them visuals because everybody has different visuals. But hash produced more hallucinations, visuals, than the weed did. So somebody that smoked, even 3 or 4 hits of hash, sometimes it was scary. I'd have to talk them down because they'd get that much higher. You know what I mean? And it was heavy, but it was more towards a heavy psychedelic as opposed to weed was kind of the difference there.
Now, what's the price breakdown of what you're selling everything for? The hash, the weed, the
LSD?
LSD?
Back then, let's go with ounces. I mean, back then, an ounce of really good weed. But now keep in mind, I had top contacts. So if I bought an ounce of weed for, say, $15, $20 on the street, that would go for more 50 or 60. Hash was pretty much, if you go buy a pound, anywhere from as little as 800 a pound to some of the, Nepalese or Afghanistan. That was pricey. That could get as high as 1,400, 1,500 a pound. But ounces of that would easily go for 150 to 175. Ounces of weed, like I said, could be anywhere from $30 to $70, even upwards. A few years later, it was over $100 an ounce. But that was really good weed. I mean, the Hawaiian was really good, but it was scarce because it was only in Hawaii. But the real good, down in Mexico, Michoacan, Panama Red, Acapulco Gold, I could get pounds of that for $200 and get rid of it quick, and anywhere from triple the money to 5, 6 times the money, bring it back and selling it in quarter pounds or ounces. With a hash, a quarter pound, $350 to $450 an ounce, 100 to 175, depending. Rarely did I sell grams, but grams, there's 28 grams to an ounce, was easily $10, which turns an ounce into 280. So it was very profitable. And even on the high end, there was times of getting, say, 10 pounds of hash, and to be fair and everything, I normally put $200 or $300 on a pound, and turn it, in pounds. With weed, if I could get the weed for $200 to $250, I was selling it from $350 to $400. Was basically the breakdown. But the coolest thing about it was that it was easy to get customers for two reasons. People don't realize what's a tiny, tiny percent of the community actually smoked weed. And you could tell, a head, we used to call them, oh, that guy's a head, that girl's a head. There was just a certain thing, past the long hair, of course, that they smoked weed. But
Like that's where the term pothead comes from, or?
probably originally, yeah. I don't consider myself a hippie. I guess I was a hippie stoner, but you could tell the people that smoked weed. Of course, there's always those people that you would never assume because they had school parents or a job. And sometimes it was a great surprise to find out, oh, hey, did you know that he gets high? And as soon as you clicked with that person, you had an in because you had something in common. I love turning people on to weed or hash for the first time. That was my favorite thing. And then, of course, they become customers down the road. But the other thing was just kind of the general attitude. It was a big difference. You know how today you hang out with people that don't smoke weed at all or somebody that smokes all the time? Their attitude in life is pretty similar on a lot of things, whatever it is, sports, business, whatever. But it was a big difference back then, a big difference, because the straighter people, the jocks, the preppies and everything, they walked that line. They dressed that part. Their hair was short. But a freak, a stoner, a hippie, way different back then, much bigger gap. I went to a private school in Rye for 2 years. To give you an idea, the entire student body from ninth grade to 12th grade was 300 people. It's a great school. I had to work my butt off, but, I got, it really helped out going to high school in the last 2 years, 11th and 12th. And out of 300 people, there was maybe 23 or 4 or 5 that were actually stoners and we found each other pretty quickly, within the first month. But it was such a different lifestyle, I made friends with everybody. I wasn't particular, it didn't matter the race, religion, the preppies, the jocks or the hippies or the stoners or the greasers even. Those were characters. And a lot of greasers looked the part, but they smoked weed. But, so I mingled because I knew in the back of my head all these people smoke weed, so I was always thinking more contacts, more sales, more money, because I didn't want to work. So, whatever it took, I went out of my way to make that happen. That's, from the years of 15 and a half to the hash trip when I was 21, I had 2 jobs. I worked at McDonald's. My dad wanted me to work 20 hours a week at a summer job. So what I did instead of working Monday through Friday, what he had in mind, 4 hours a day, I worked Saturday and Sunday, 10 hours each day. But after 3 weeks, I asked for a raise. They didn't give it to me, and I quit. And something very funny about that real quick, why I don't ever touch fast food, why I haven't been into a McDonald's since probably 1968. When you worked at McDonald's back then, this was, like 67, 68, something like that. The Big Mac was the big, they didn't have, 24 other items. It was very small amount of items. But at my age, every hour we had to take a 10-minute break. And during that 10 minutes, we could eat whatever we wanted. So needless to say, I always had a big appetite. I was always into sports. I always was in shape. But I stuffed my face with this crap. And after 6, 10-hour shifts, I got so sick of it, I can't even look at it now. That was the end of it. And the other job I had was at an antique shop, which was really cool. I had just recently gotten my license, so I worked there for a couple of months. One summer, I think it was in my senior year or junior year, because I had to stay back in 9th grade to make it into this private school. So since my birthday was in December anyway, I said, what the hell, I wanted to go. And then I transferred back to high school in 11th and 12th grade, which was a piece of cake after working my butt off in this private school. But the antique shop, those were the only 2 jobs That lasted about 3 months. I was delivering furniture to the back roads of Greenwich and Old Greenwich and Stamford, people that I drive their antique backs and stuff in McDonald's. Those were the only 2 jobs I had. And along the way, leading to 21, that was my first job when I went to Morocco to smuggle hash. And that's when things really took off.
Now, what was the community's view, like law enforcement, the government, on hash
Oh
and
yeah,
weed?
that's when
In the
that's when
60s.
profiling started. That's when profiling started. Anybody with long hair, we were getting pulled over all the time. They were really down on it, but you got to understand, Ian, back then when I was 15, 16, 17, 18, so we're talking, 67, 69, I was 16 when I went to Woodstock. So 70, even 71, they were so ignorant about, certainly about the effects, the law enforcement, the straight community, the conservative community had no way, they had no idea what smoking weed or taking LSD would do to somebody. I mean, when you're pulled over with a cop and your eyes are hanging out like this and you're tripping and you're seeing everything, looking behind a cop getting pulled over, they knew something was off, but they had no idea what was off. 2 quick stories. I'm sitting in a park bench, 16, in Rye, Saturday afternoon, 2 p.m. The library's there. It's busy, little village. And one of my girlfriends comes over. We're sitting down, just hanging out. And she goes, Scott, or Gus was my nickname. She goes, Gus, check this out. And she opened up this tin. And she had like 4 or 5 different pieces of hash, small pieces, a gram each or 2 grams. And she's sitting there. A cop, literally, one of the local cops, we all knew the cops' names. They knew most of our names. He walks up behind us. He looks over our shoulder. He's looking right at this tin. And he said, put that away. Get out of here. Go find something to do. To this day, I obviously were shocked, but we kept it together. I think he thought it was incense or something like that. That's how ignorant they were. They just didn't know. One other story, which is hilarious. Again, I was 16, I think, or 17. I used to, every Friday night, I'd take a hit of LSD, Purple Housley, with the same 4 guys. We did this about 10 months in a row, and then we did too much and we never, tripped again, or we did, but, not together, kind of. We all took LSD, typical Friday night. One guy would pick me up in his Volkswagen or station wagon. He'd have 2 other guys. We'd all go out. Sometimes we had a 5th guy. There was 4 of us this night. And one of the characters, Bigelow, was using his Firebird, really sweet 400 Firebird convertible. And we go on 684, actually. And this is about 2 hours into the trip, so we're right about peaking, like really, the Purple Housley, to give you the quick rundown. You take it, you get off in 20 minutes, you keep getting higher, in about 2.5 hours, 2 to 2.5 hours, you're peaking. That lasts a couple hours, then you start coming back down. And on the way back down, if you smoke some hash or weed, you'll go back up, but it's a little fuzzier if you smoked with it. So we didn't smoke anything, but 1 hit of Purple Housley on a scale of 1 to 10. It was some of the best acid in the country. And keep in mind, people, I might reel the tape back and say the people that grew weed and made hash in Morocco and India and Pakistan, Lebanon and Nepal, and the growers in Mexico, they had a lot of pride. So their product was 5 stars. People today say, oh, this weed in the store is much better than it. That's a crock. The weed back then was better. So at any rate, we took this hit of acid and we decide out of the blue, it's 18 degrees in February, we're going to pull off on the shoulder. And in 1969, there's not that many people at, 10 o'clock at night driving on 684. They just recently built it. And out of nowhere, lights pull up behind us. And I hear my buddy Ziggy in the back seat, long hair, My other friend has hair down to here. I have hair down, feather earring. We were quite the crew. And I hear Ziggy goes, "Oh, no, it's a cop." He was kind of under his breath. The cop comes up and he asks us, "What are you doing?" The top, now keep in mind, we had trouble getting the top up. So imagine it being 18 degrees. The top is just out of the thing, but it's 3/4 open. And the cop comes up and asks, "What are you guys doing?" And we're all blah, 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 putting down the roof. And he looked at us like we were on Mars. Now, we all knew we were totally effed up. Totally. And the cop looked at us like he'd never seen anything like it. He was so dumbfounded that there was an uncomfortable silence for 20 or 30 seconds. Now, the one thing with LSD that anybody will tell you, that when you're really tripping heavily on LSD, 1 minute can literally feel like an hour. Time crawls by. Like, this is a commitment. You're committing to 8 hours, which feels like a couple of days. And he was so confused, he didn't say anything. He finally asked for the registration, which we always had. We always had our shit together. So we go in the glove box, pull out the Reggie. He asked for the license, no problem. And he looks inside around the car. We're not smoking anything. Everything's cool. And he asks us one by one, what your name and where you live. And I just reeled off, Scott Gussin, 7 Old Orchard Road, Portchester, New York. And my zip code. He asks everybody else. And he looks, he just kind of shakes his head. And he's so removed from like this scene that he literally said, "Okay, just take it easy." And he walked away. Nothing happened. And we were free to go. By the way, we did get the top down finally, and we pulled away. But that's kind of how the attitude was. Like, people just didn't know for a while. And then, I don't know if you ever heard of it, there was a film made in the 50s, Reefer Madness, a classic. And it was how these guys, it was made like in the 40s or something, and they smoked pot and lost their mind and turned crazy and everything. It was old cult film, but it was so removed that they just didn't know, Ian. They just had no idea. I remember talking to parents and my dad, like if I got off on the LSD too soon before 6 o'clock, on the way out, and I could tell there was a vibe where he thought something was off, but he wasn't sure. They were just that far removed, that far. Oh, quick funny story. What happens sometimes to people in LSD, I won't remember it if I don't tell it now. Mm-hmm. The fifth guy that used to come with us every once in a while to take acid finally took we took too much acid in the final trip. 4 of us were fine. We recovered, but we just didn't trip again for years, or maybe never with some of their cases. But we didn't do our Friday night thing because we overdid it. We did 2 hits of acid, 1 hit of THC, and smoked a bunch of hash before we got off. And it's in this book that I wrote, but we had quite an experience. And this one guy that didn't trip anymore kind of lost it that night. When I mean lost it, like he was very strange. Even the next day when we were all back to our normal freak selves, he was weird. In the car ride home, we had gone up to upstate New York. One of my friends was going to school, Dutchess Community College. We were in a frat house, did a bunch of acid, and the next morning we dropped. It was 2 hours away from our house. That was the night that we did too much. And we said goodbye to him, and he was like, goodbye. He was like a different person. And like that experience like changed his being. So life went on. And I'd still run into these guys who were still good friends. We just didn't do acid together. About 6, 8, 10 months later, something like that. It's hard to peel into the time frame. Nobody had heard from him. Nobody knew what he was doing. Nothing. I come home one Saturday afternoon. I wasn't, well, I probably had smoked some weed, but nothing. Excuse me. Nothing out of the ordinary. And I came home and I opened my front door to a sight that if I had a month of Sundays, I couldn't have dreamed this up. And what I was looking at, and we lived in, a nice 3-bedroom, middle-class home in Rye Brook. my dad was on the living room, cross-legged, smoking a cigar. And my buddy, my old acid buddy, was sitting there. I knew something was very, very bizarre because he had a black suit on, white shirt and tie. And from what I knew of the years I knew him, I knew he'd never owned a suit. And he had a Bible in his hand. And he had completely gone, and nothing against Jehovah's Witnesses, but he had completely, from this like wild acid experience, like converted to a Jehovah's Witness. And my father is a pretty funny guy. He was a great dad, and he's he knows about the world and stuff like that. I told him about everything I did in my life. He was totally cool, years later. And he was sitting there listening, like interested, although I knew he wasn't. He was being polite. And this guy had been there for like 45 minutes or so, going on about Jehovah's Witness, trying to convince my father that was the way, and blah, blah, blah. And I came in, and the good news, Ian, was that he was just wrapping it up. We said hello, and I could tell this was a totally different person from the person that we went through and had so much fun, losing control, laughter, and had so many great nights. And he had just become this other person from, no doubt, the LSD. From that one night. From that one night. But changed his life.
I realized I was reaching for an energy drink every single time I got tired, and to be honest, that's not a habit I want to keep anymore. As the summer starts to wind down and the schedules start to fill up again, I'm hitting a hard reset. Instead of reaching for an energy drink in the morning, I'm starting my mornings with AG1, and it's the one habit I refuse to compromise on before the workday starts. 1 scoop, 8 ounces of cold water every single morning. What I like is that it's not 10 different supplements sitting on my counter. It's one drink that includes a multivitamin, pre- and probiotics, superfoods, and antioxidants. I always tell people that consistency is way more important than perfection, and for me, I'm being consistent with AG1 to start my mornings.
And look what comes in the welcome kit.
For a limited time, save 20% on your first subscription order of AG1 Next Gen or AG1 Pro at drinkag1.com/locked-in. That's drinkag1.com/locked-in. Tell us about after high school.
After high school?
Yeah.
After high school, well, I was definitely scared to go to Vietnam, but I had a lucky break. When I was 7, I fell off a bicycle, landed on my head. My ear was bleeding. They didn't know anything about it back then. They made me stay in bed during the summer for 3 weeks. It sucked. Reel the tape forward. I always had to go to the ear doctor. It was the inner ear. Years later, in 82, I had 4 operations. I had to rebuild my inner ear. But I always had a problem with my ear, and they didn't know enough back then. This would have been like 59 when it happened, and they didn't know much more in the 60s, even though I was constantly going to the same ear doctor, eye, ear, nose guy who was a friend of my dad's. They just didn't know enough. And when I was 18, my birthday, this is when the lottery was going on. So I was number 2. I would have definitely been sent to the front lines of Vietnam. But my dad took it upon himself to mail the military my medical records. And when they saw that my ear was basically, I had a chronic mastoid disease. I was deaf in the right ear. I got it back maybe 20% of the hearing after the operations. So when my dad mailed in that I needed a new inner eardrum rebuilt, that's what I got later. He sent him the letter, and they sent me back the best letter I ever had in my life. Don't even show up for the physical. Didn't even have to go. And at the time, all my friends were going to college or trying to avoid the draft, doing a lot of acid, dressing up as women, getting, there was psychologists and psychiatrists that for $200 would write you notes saying you were nuts, whatever it took. One guy, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but one guy, it still gives me the woolies. He was drafted, but he legitimately hurt his ankle. He busted his ankle, and they got back in touch with him in 6 months, his his ankle was kind of healed. He had to go into the first draft the next day, and he knew that they were going to take him. We went out that night, and he said, Gus, you got to do me the biggest favor you ever did in your life. I said, what? He goes, you got to crack my ankle. I said, man, I can't do that. I can't do that. Come on, Tommy, don't make me do this. We went out, and I'm not a drinker, but we drank, I don't know, 3, 4, 6 packs. And keep in mind, I'm the guy that, will get a buzz after 2 cans. We drank all this beer. I got wasted. Oh, I can't even say it. He put his ankle up on it. We had a big cinder block, and I had this big lead piece, and I came down hard and crashed his ankle. Oh, it hurts even to think of it, but I got him out of the draft. So he was cool. He totally, his foot was like this big for about a month. But getting back to, he ended up going to college like a year later because the Army didn't take him. I did some serious damage. And when I got out of school, because I thought it was the right thing to do, I did kind of want to go to college. All my buddies were going to college. I wanted to go to Boston University, but my grades just weren't good enough. So I did get accepted to Roger Williams in Bristol, Rhode Island, which now I hear is a 4-year school, and it's it's come a long way since 1971, 72.
Yeah, it's a pretty good school now, I think.
Yeah, it's a really good school. Back then it was a 2-year school. I'm not saying it's a bad school, but so I went to Roger Williams for 2 years. But really, I excelled in making more contacts. I mean, truth be told, yes, I took psychology classes, which were pretty cool, some business classes. I remember I had an English class that I aced, but my girlfriend, Leslie, also the one that went to Morocco with me, she wrote all my papers, so I got A's in that class, but I got some stuff out of school. I never, I went for 2 years, and I don't even know, honestly. I don't think I got an official degree or whatever. I was telling people, yeah, I got an associate's degree, and my lovely daughter, Arliss, she corrected me on that in front of a bunch of people one time a couple of years ago. She goes, Dad, you never got a degree. So I went for 2 years, but my sole purpose in going, I mean, I'd be lying if I told you anything else, Ian, was, school, more contacts, right near Boston, like pretty close to Boston. So I set up my schedule to have all my classes on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and I had a 4-day weekend. So I was off for those 4 days, and I'd always leave school. I'd come back to New York, or I'd go to Boston, and that's when things really started picking up even better. I made more contacts at my school. I'd make contacts through friends of friends and everything, because Boston was a great place. The Boston Commons was, really cooking back in the early 70s. A lot of hippies, freaks were hanging out, especially on the weekends. So, I made a lot of contacts for pot and weed, weed and hash mostly. And one of the funniest things I used to do, because I rarely got a car. My dad had bought a car for the housekeeper, this was from day one. My dad bought the housekeepers a car. And when I was 16, I got my license. So if my housekeeper, whoever was with me, one of the housekeepers, if they weren't using it, I occasionally got to take it to Rye High School. Once in a while, maybe 2 weekends out of the year, I'd get to take, or 2 weeks out of the year, I could drive to college. But mostly I was hitching, because back then hitching was just as easy. So I'd hitch home or hitch into Boston, hang out with all my other friends that did have cars. And what I did many, many times, I'd come back to New York and I'd score a pound or two of weed, and I'd put it in a paper bag with some groceries like sandwiches or whatever on top. And I'd fold up the bag with the weed in there. And what I would do is I'd get on 95 and get right on the exit in Rye or Portchester on the entrance, but, going down. And I'd put the bag up on the shoulder about 20 or 30 feet in front of me, and I'd start hitching. So this way, if a cop pulled me over, the bag was far enough away that I didn't have anything on me. But if I got a ride, I knew it would take a while for them to stop. And on the way up to the car, I'd just pick up the bag, jump in the car, and that's how I got to school. Did it all the time. So school was for me more of a platform to create the business. Like yourself, I give you a lot of credit at 19. Here you are with this amazing scam. I got to give you all the credit in the world. But that's it took me a while longer. But, ever since the Fireball days, I knew in my heart of hearts, I knew when I was 13, 14, you get bar mitzvahed, you turn into a man. What a joke at 12. Yeah, right, I'm a man. But I knew early on that I'm not saying I wanted to be a weed dealer for the rest of my life. I really wanted my own business, but I knew that I could never commit, to a format, to a schedule 9 to 5. That's just not the person I am. I would have been miserable, even regardless of the money. And the one thing about the money, and I regret, now I'm in my 70s, 73. When I was 20, 30s, and 40s, I was more concerned, even though I have kids, I don't regret it for a second because I would have never spent that much time if I wasn't, I was a middleman, and if I wasn't making all this money middling weed deals and a few hash deals back then, turned mostly to weed, I would have never spent that time with my kids. But early on, I was trying. I used to rack my brain to think of a business, but I knew I had to make money. So really, that whole life, I had a 37-year run of really not many jobs. I mean, no jobs, really. I had a limousine service out in San Diego in the 70s and 80s. After that, when the limousine service was bought, I was running the show, but I wasn't the owner. I had a metal cutting tool business. But I was making money, but these were fronts for the weed business, So all along, I was trying to just make money and get ahead. And it was hard. It wasn't easy because I'd have 6 great months and make money, but then there were no good deals for 3, 4, 5 months. Weed dealing used to be very seasonal, especially in the late 70s and all during the 80s. It was great for 6 months and not much going on for 6 months. But I never considered getting a job. I always wanted to try to find a business. I had a few, but nothing that really did it. You know what I mean? Nothing that I knew, okay, I can make 6 figures eventually if I stick to it.
And now it's probably easier to be a drug or a weed dealer back then, even drug dealer, because everything's cash.
Yeah,
you don't
exactly.
have to launder money. You don't
exactly.
Have to, it's normal.
Yes, it was perfectly normal. And, I got to the level where, you sell enough, I paid taxes, but I still needed, I needed a front, to start living in some of the places out in Cali that I was living in.
So when you leave college, do you go right to Cali? Is that what happens next, or?
Basically, yes. Basically what happened, I left college, but right after college, I met one of the best contacts of my life. And that is Cassidy, the gentleman that I went to Europe with to do a hash scam. This was my big opportunity, and I will say the best vacation I ever had in my life. If we could hit on that for a second,
yeah.
I'll give you the short version. It's all in here. The short version is I wanted to meet this guy because my friend Cassidy was avoiding Vietnam. And he's also an avid surfer, ridiculous, since he was a kid, very good surfer. He found this hidden surf haven back in the early 70s. It's a little tiny village named Medea Plage in Morocco, North Africa, about halfway between Tangiers to the north, Casablanca to the south. And he loved it, all the surfing. He also met a hash contact, really good hash contact. So while he was surfing, he still needed money. He's not going to get a job in Morocco. So he started sending hash back in speakers, stereo speakers. Excuse me. He was sending these big speakers, like the Jensens and JBLs from back in the day. But he was only able to put 2 or 3 pounds of hash in each speaker. Now, understand, Ian, in 70, 71, 72, they didn't have dogs. They weren't, prying apart the mail. He sent the speakers back to a mutual friend. That mutual friend gave me all his hash. I sold all his hash, made money, but it was only 2 or 3 pounds. So for 2 years, I wanted to know who this guy was. I want to be friends with this guy. Then I got my opportunity because one of these deals got screwed up. Long story short, we were both in my friend's house. We met, we became friends, we became close. All of a sudden, it's a nasty way to put it, but we didn't need our friend. We didn't need our mutual friend. I was the guy doing the work. He was the guy with the hash. That's just business. That's just how it was. You cut out the middleman and you go to the source, and that's just what was happening. So originally, getting back to the hash story, Cassidy said, why don't we use my boat? From all his hash smuggling and living over there, he saved his money, bought a 36-foot sloop, really nice boat. Originally, I had a contact that was going to Colombia, somebody I knew, from high school and, hanging around, because I was in a rock and roll band and blues band, and I knew people all over Westchester, all different kinds of people, like I mentioned earlier. And I knew this guy that his family was very wealthy, but they were in the oil business. His girlfriend, her family was very wealthy. This couple was going down to Bogota. They were buying usually about 2 keys or more of cocaine, putting them in false bottom suitcases, flying back in to the States and selling a really good coke, high-end coke. Now, understand, I did coke, but not a lot. Back in the day, there was something, pink cocaine was the best ever, just incredible. 2 little lines that big, and you were good for 4 hours. But this guy was smuggling coke. Why I wanted him is the light bulb went off. Why don't I get this guy and convince him? I got a sailboat. Let's go down to Colombia and get, several pounds, several keys, 50 pounds of coke, and make a ton of money. And so I set this whole thing up. Truth be told, when it was showtime, I got really nervous because I didn't want to step over that line. There's a big difference between selling weed and hash and selling coke. It's the whole vibe, and it's the loss, the laws, 1 year of weed is like, 15 years of coke or whatever. Back then it was really scary. So I left Westchester at the time, and Cassidy had his boat docked in Palm Beach, Florida. I went down there. The guy that was going to, go do this coke thing with a contact, he even gave me $500. Now, this is 1973, in the beginning of 1973. $500 was like a lot of money. So we had to outfit the boat, not only with groceries, but we had to get, I think, fix the steering vane where, it controls when you're sleeping below. And it's almost time. This guy's supposed to come down in 4 days. I'm getting really nervous, Ian, because I'm getting cold feet. First of all, sailing, a week, 10 days down to Colombia and bringing back coke. I was really, really nervous about it. I was thinking, oh boy, you wanted it. Here it is. You got it. And I thought, maybe you made a mistake. I was, lack of a better word, I was paranoid about doing this trip. I thought, you never crossed over the line. And now all this stuff is starting to form in my head. And I'm thinking, geez, what an idiot. And I can't tell Cassidy, oh, I'm scared. I got to go home. The best thing ever happened. This guy doesn't show up. The coke guy, Billy, he doesn't show up. I'm calling him, doesn't answer his phone. This goes on for 2 or 3 days. This guy got cold feet. We never saw him again because what happened is he got cold feet and didn't come. Sad story. 6 months later, he went down, got busted coming back with his girlfriend in the false bottom because they couldn't get the flight to New York. They took a flight to Mexico. He got searched. Him and his girlfriend had to spend like 3 years or something in the cruddiest, scary Mexican jail on the planet. She survived because she's a tough broad. I even know her. I don't mean to say broad. I'm using it in a good sense. She's doing great. She lives down in the Florida Keys, and the guy, Billy, never was the same. But at any rate, he never showed up. So Cassidy says to me, Gus, let's take a walk. So we're down in Palm Beach. Now we have no money. We have a sailboat that's paid for, but we have no money. We have no place to go. We can't sail to Morocco. We don't have the funds, nothing. And we take this walk all the way around the boatyard, around this bowling alley. And he goes, listen, I got another idea. What do you think about this? And the short version is he had a buyer for his boat for $8,000. Doesn't sound like much, but keep in mind, this is 1973. That's a lot of money in 1973. He goes, I'll sell the boat and finance a trip. You and me will go over to Germany. We'll buy a Volkswagen bus. We'll drive down to Morocco, to Tetuan. We'll buy hash. He figured that we could get about 50 pounds because we had a very unique hiding place. And we'll come back. But here's the deal. Since I'm financing, he's smart and I got it. I understood. He goes, when you come back, and he knows this routine because he's driven back and forth many times in the 2 years already. When you get out of Morocco, you have to, Morocco, imagine this is Africa, and Morocco's on the very northern tip of Africa, which has whatever, 37 countries or 40 something, whatever it is. But when you leave Morocco, Ian, you get on a ferry. You drive on a ferry with your vehicle, or you walk on as a backpacker, and you cross the Mediterranean. The Rock of Gibraltar is right there to the left, to the east, and you arrive in Spain. It's about a 2-hour ferry ride. But he says, when we leave Morocco, I am going to get out of the bus before you drive through customs. And he was going to walk through pretending not to know me. He had his backpack. He has his surfboard, the whole 9 yards. He had extra $3,000-$4,000. So theoretically, fortunately, we didn't have to find out what would happen. But if I got busted, if they searched the bus and found this hash, he was going to come in and save the day. Thank God we didn't have to find that out. And so he was going to pretend on the ferry not to know me. And then when you get in Spain, same thing. You get off the ferry and you got to get searched. And then the rest is like the rest of the countries, like when you go through Spain and France and Italy, we went all the way up to Rotterdam to send the bus back. It's like a toll booth, so he rode through. But he made it crystal clear in the beginning. When he asked me if I would be willing to do it, Ian, it took me about 30 seconds to say absolutely, because I was so excited that I didn't have to smuggle cocaine. This trip sounded great. I'm all in. So I stayed down on the boat for a couple of days and then flew back to Westchester and hung out at my dad's house. His mom, ironically, lived in Harrison, right near where my dad was in Rye Brook. But then I started to think the first day or two, I thought to myself, you know what? I need my girlfriend, and now she was my friend, but we were tight. We had gone out already, blah, blah, blah. She was 3 years younger than I was. Stella, I thought, I need Stella along with me. A couple's going to look better, blah, blah, blah. So I asked Cassidy about it, and Cassidy said, great idea, done. So the deal was we went up. He sold the boat right away. We went up, and we just hung out for about a month. I went to Stella knowing, and Cassidy said, well, do you think she'll say yes? And Stella said yes quicker than I said yes. She said, yeah. I said, do you want to go to Europe? We're going to Morocco. Didn't say anything about the hash, but she knew me well enough. She said yes, done deal. So from the very beginning of this trip, we never talked about smuggling hash. It wasn't like, cloak and dagger. Cassidy was 26, I'm 21. And believe it or not, now it's a different world out there, so nobody point the finger at me. Stella was 18. Now, can you imagine her parents liking and trusting me enough to let their 18-year-old daughter go with me to Europe for almost 4 months or so? And we all got, Cassidy, I'm saying his real name, but Cassidy needed a driver's license. In Europe back then, I think it's different now. You just take your passport in, which he already had, and you get a driver's license. And Stella and I needed passports, and I needed a driver's license. So we went to the city together. We got all our paperwork, took off, flew over. It all went really well. Flew over to Munich, Germany, then took a train to Frankfurt to one of the biggest Volkswagen dealerships. And we bought a very unique, here's a picture of it, very close to the real thing, Volkswagen bus. It was like right in the front row, and there's hundreds and hundreds of buses. And we knew it was almost calling our name. We nicknamed it Sweet Jane. We didn't even test drive any other, and this was one of the biggest lots. It's like, 2 football fields full of cars, probably 3. We bought the bus and we went to a furniture store. We built a comfortable seat because it was bucket seats, no windows on the side, and it had this high roof. If you look, it wasn't a pop-up, but it was a high roof. And if you're 6'2", you could walk through that roof with a clearance over your head. Nothing in the back, but we were going to get to that. And so we had the seat. And in back now, we just have our sleeping bags. We have his surfboard. And we had 3 gallons of polyurethane resin. And I'll tell you why in a moment. We took our time. We drove all the way down. We drove a little through Sweden. And then we drove down the coast. And we passed, all this beautiful down the coast, passing Italy and France and Spain, or I think it's the other way around. Stopping to get cheese and breads from the ladies on the roadside. Ian, it was the best trip of my life. And we took our time. We were in no rush. We had no time limit. We took our time and we drove all the way down into Morocco. We found a campground. And the first thing we had to do was get the hash. This is in Tetuan. And our hash contact was married, great guy. And he had a family. He lived maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes from the campground, but he had told Cassidy, don't drive the bus near my house. He didn't want any local police to see, the bus or whatever. So we got settled. Cassidy went first to give him the money. He gave him 1,500 pounds American, which is a ton of money in Morocco. And then he invited us back to his house to have dinner with his family. So we went back and we had this great dinner, early dinner, like 5 to 7, and he treated us real well. Now, the communication was that Arabic has many, many different dialects, but some of them are similar to Spanish. And Cassidy spoke fluent Spanish, so that's how they communicated. He spoke a little bit of English, our hash contact, and he said, well, this is what you have to do. He marked an X on the spot. Now, granted, understand, we had already Cassidy had handed him the $1,500 worth dinner, and he says, my brothers are going to meet you on the top of this mountain at midnight. Now, he could have ran away or whatever. We never would have saw him again, but he was a stand-up guy. We went back to the campground. We had to kill several hours, and then we drove. And we're looking at this map, and we get up to the top of a mountain. Now imagine the 3 of us are in the Volkswagen bus, and we're up on top of a mountain with no man-made things anywhere. No utility poles, no houses, no lights, nothing. Scary as you can imagine. The last mile or so was a dirt road, and we pull off under this big, I think it was an oak tree, and it's about 10 minutes to midnight. We timed it perfectly because it was about an hour up the mountain road from the main highway. And out of the freaking blue, at 2 minutes at 12, and to this day, Ian, I have no idea where these guys come from. 2 of his brothers come up off the side of the mountain, and they have this big tan duffel bag. And I'm kind of looking around how the fuck did they get here? What's up? But we didn't question that. We were more about, let's get the hash and get the hell out of here. It's starting to get okay, they could have killed us right then and there, threw us off the cliff, stolen the bus and drove away. We open up the side door of the bus and we throw the hash in the back. Oh, by the way, Stella's half asleep in the back. She doesn't even care about any of this. We open up and I look in and I see this, and I'm like a hash connoisseur at this time from Reuben's schooling and all those years of selling hash. I know what's up. And the hash was all in cellophane. In Lebanon, they make hash what's called ores. In Morocco, they're called plaques because they're all rectangular shape with a thin piece of cellophane around it. And the cellophane you can see right through. And the hash is anywhere from, they're not meticulously weighed. So these plaques are anywhere from 7.5, 8 ounces up to maybe 14, 15 ounces per piece. I had done the math, and Cassidy thought we could fit 50 pounds. I'm going to tell you in a second our great stash. I had it down to 44 pounds. I know the size. And we ended up buying 44 pounds of hash, and you could see right through the cellophane, they had double zeros that were stamped into each and every plaque. Farmers make hash this way. They grow pot plants, and they go through the fields with a big white thin cloth, and they gather all the resin. Then when they gather all the resin, they come back and they put them between, almost imagine a giant ironing board, and the hotter the press, the better the hash, and the longer the press. That's essentially how they made hash in Morocco. So they're all like that. That's the gist of it, the short version. And I'm looking, and I open up a little cellophane. I smell it. I could bend it. I knew it was the right thing. And Cassidy's like, Gus, don't you want to smoke some? Don't you want to smoke? Well, the last thing Ian I wanted to do was take even one hit, because I knew if I did that, I'd get stoned. I'd get paranoid. We still got to drive 7 hours to this little beach village, Medea Plot. I said, believe me, trust me, Cassidy. This is on me. It's great. We said goodbye to the brothers. This whole thing took like 5 minutes tops. And the brothers were great, gave us a hug. They went off the side of the mountain, never to be seen again. Ian, to this day, I don't know if there was some kind of scooter down there or a camel. I don't know if these guys walked 10 miles. I have no idea, but they vanished. So we drive down the road, and we're a little paranoid. Now, this whole trip, we all smoked cigarettes. Luke was buying these rot-gut European smokes because he was trying to save money. So for our trip this day, he broke out at that moment. He broke out a carton of Marlboro. So it was like, all right, the cheapskate is finally, coming through. Like I said, we had about 7 hours to the house. We had about an hour down this mountain. Coming down that mountain, we're going the speed limit, which is like 25, 30. It seemed like it took like 7 hours itself just to get down the mountain. We must have smoked a pack of cigarettes between us. We get down, finally, we get on the highway. Everything's cool. I think it was 100 kilometers, which is like 60 miles an hour. The bus, by the way, was in kilometers, but I knew that 60, 100 or whatever it was, I think it was 100 miles an hour, 60 clicks. So we're driving, and after about an hour and a half, 2 hours on the road, everything's cool. We're starting to feel, okay, this is good. We had 8 tracks, so we're listening to music in the background. Stella couldn't give a shit. She's asleep in the back, like not even concerned, not even, and I only wish I had her mentality. That's why I brought her along. And all of a sudden, I can still remember the rush, the hair starting to pop in the back of my neck. All of a sudden, imagine coming down a highway at 50 miles an hour, and there's this big curve in the road where you're going, but you don't see around the curve. We come around this curve, and there is a roadblock, a full-blown roadblock on both sides of the road, I might add. And here we are, like, a couple 100 yards away. And the last thing we could do is, they set it up this way on purpose, of course. We can't pull over. We can't turn around because there's a meridian in between the highways. There's no exit. This is it. And we have the hash not in our stash yet. This is just in a duffel bag in the back with a surfboard on our backpacks and all that stuff. And, Cassidy and I look at each other, let's just move ahead. So we moved ahead. Now, the interesting thing in both Spain and Morocco is it's hard to detect the difference between soldiers, the military, and the police. They're very similar. I think this was a little of both. I think there was mostly soldiers, but a couple of police, but that's almost irrelevant. But these guys had one of those road signs, with the seesaws and a block. They have the automatic weapons. We're going through this roadblock. There's no way around it. I mean, I don't mean run through it. I mean, we're going to stop at it.
I teamed up with Hungry Root to build a digital cookbook, and I called it the Commissary Upgrade because I know we're all tired of eating ramen noodles. I was looking for fast, delicious meals that we can make quick at home. When you click the link for the Digital Commissary Upgrade cookbook, you can see recipes that I've personally selected and make on my own every night at home, such as the chicken fajitas with fresh tomato salsa, the black and medium cooked shrimp tagliatelle Alfredo, grilled pork chops with rice, green beans, scallions, and a sweet chili lime bowl, and eggs and cuties. blueberry oatmeal, seared salmon Southwest salad, spiced lamb vindaloo plus red potatoes, the Swiss burger and roasted broccoli florets, and the black bean avocado whole grain pita pockets. The best part about using Hungryroot is that once you go through a digital cookbook like mine and see recipes you like, you can have all the ingredients to make those dishes shipped right to your door, and they arrive pretty quickly in a box just like this. Seriously, every single ingredient right down to the nitty-gritty, and they even send you snacks just like these, my personal favorite, the skinny dipped peanut butter cups.
And today we're gonna be making the blackened shrimp tagliatelle Alfredo.
That sounds good. Let's get into it. This dish only takes 9 minutes to cook, and you could find the exact instructions on my digital cookbook. Hungryroot is literally so easy to use and put it into action because I just bring my iPad into the kitchen with the recipes and have Letitia do all the work. I'm the instruction guy. This only took 9 minutes to cook, and it's delicious. Yeah, you guys need to get on Hungryroot because we're dialed in on it, and we're gonna be using this every night. Explore my digital cookbook on Hungryroot today and find recipes that are right for you. Go to hungryroot.com/lockedin to access my cookbook, The Commissary Upgrade.
So we stop. And on the way up, now we're only 100 yards away, going slowly. And Cassidy says, Stella, wake up, get up here, sit down, bring the passports. We always kept the passports, at a particular spot. He said, bring the passports. So she got up in her little custom chair between the two, the two bucket seats of the bus. And the guy comes up and he looks stern and serious, and he's like 40 something. And, we're just kids, and he comes up, I had my window down already. And I said, something lame like, oh, hello, sir. Or I might have said buenas noches or something. I'm not even sure. I might have said it or I might not. My mouth was probably open, just wondering what was coming. And he said, passports. And he was still very serious. And I'm seeing in my peripheral vision, there's soldiers, there's a dozen of them or cops or whatever. They're all around. And there's, this could be it, So I'm trying my best not even to think about that. Everything's cool, calm, and collective. He takes the passports. He looks through one. He sees American. He looks through another and another. And all of a sudden, when he gets to the second one and then the third one, I see a big smile on his face. And he goes, oh, Americans, yes, oh, good, and now he's all excited. And I'm thinking, what the hell? And he goes, okay, no problem. He didn't even look. He didn't even stick his head in my window or much less open up the side door. He goes, go ahead, because he knows American tourism is money. And we're driving down the road, and we're like, what the fuck was that? Well, what was that? What were they looking for? And then I think it was Stella. It was either Stella or Cassidy. Oh, that's what it is. They're looking for Israeli passports. During that time in 1973, I think it lasted about a year or whatever. I'm not a history buff, but there was something called the Yom Kippur Wars. And it was a big argument between the Moroccans and Israelis. So we figured out that's it. They were looking for Israeli passports. The Israelis shouldn't have been there, or if they were going to get interrogators searched or whatever. That's what the whole thing was for. Sure enough, 2 hours later, same thing happens. Another hour before we're an hour outside of Medea Plage, the little village, same thing. So we had 3 of those stops, but the same results in each stop. All's good. We pull up. Now it's like, 7:30 in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. And we're in this small town, maybe 100 people, one little shack where they sold fruits and vegetables. That was like the main store. There's a bigger town, 18 kilometers away. And Cassidy says, stay right here. I'll be back in 20 or 30 minutes. I'm going to go get us a house. This isn't like, no computers. This isn't like, oh, yeah, we got to do this in advance. No. He goes away. He's back in half hour. Let's go check out our house. We go right down the road. There's a small little road, and right across is the beach. Gorgeous beach. He found us a gorgeous, fully furnished. There's a cement wall all the way around, a big white wall of cement with jagged glass on the top. I guess that's to keep intruders out. But there's no intruders. The whole thing is for show, probably. And the furniture is all Moroccan colors, big pillows. It's great. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, $80 a month. That's what it cost us. We moved in, and this is our stash. Now, I'm going to ruin this part of the book, but it's worth it. We have to build a stash. So we decide that very first day, now it's only like 9 in the morning or something. Let's get this done and over with. So we go into Kenitra to get supplies. We weren't going to bring over the hammer, the screwdriver, the saw, and all that stuff. So we bought all that stuff in town. We also bought a couple of pieces of plywood, 3/4 inch thick, 4x12. And we had to get some 2x4s. We needed 4 pieces of 2x4s. One, the length of the bed and the width of the bed. We had to have a couple pieces that were 8 pieces, a couple of pieces that were 4 foot, and then we had to have 4 pieces for legs. We bought an extra piece of plywood where we made a 3-foot high bookshelf in the back. So what we did is, imagine we'll use the book as a piece of plywood. We put the first piece of plywood down. Then what we did is we individually wrapped. Now the hashish is only in cellophane. And back then they didn't have the high-end stuff. So what we did is we wrapped all the hash in heavy-duty tin foil. I think we brought that from the States, the tin foil and the Ziploc baggies. We wrapped the hash in tin foil and Ziploc baggies and got all the air out and everything. Now imagine the piece of plywood sitting here. Then we attached the 2x4s all around. So now you have a little depth. You have the 2x4s and the plywood in the bottom. We put all the hashish in there, and the key ingredient that we brought over was 3 gallons of a material. It's a liquid material called polyurethane resin. That's what they used to, and they still make. They used to repair surfboards and make surfboards that way with polyurethane resin. And keep in mind, today you could never bring that on a plane, but back then it was no big deal, carrying 3 cans of polyurethane resin. And since Cassidy always carried a surfboard, nobody at customs, gave us a hard time. It was all cool, totally cool. And so now we have it all there, and we pour gently all this. It's kind of, what it's kind of like? It's kind of like, imagine a thick syrup. And we covered it perfectly even, smoothed it all out, made sure all the plaques were underneath and so forth. Now, the first thing we did is let it dry. That stuff dries pretty quick, within 45 minutes, an hour. It was hard as a rock. So now imagine inside the bed on the plywood with the 2x4s around, you have this rock. It's like as hard as cement or rock. And inside the polyurethane resin that is hardened is a hash. Then we put the other piece of plywood on top of that. We sand it all down. We put the legs on. We painted it. We bought a can of dull gray paint, nothing to stand out. We painted the bed, the legs, and the other cabinet we made. We painted all that gray. I had also found in town these pieces of bamboo that fit perfectly on the inside of the Volkswagen bus to make it more homey, and it was something else to deter being searched. They could look behind the bamboo. And we brought it out, made sure it fit right in the bed. It was perfect. Then we brought it back inside. We decided to keep it in the guest room. We had an unbelievable, 4.5 weeks, great stay. Luke went surfing every day. Stella and I did a lot of boogie boarding. We went to town. We met this young kid. He was about 13, Mohammed, on the second day. He brought us in to get us better prices. One thing about Morocco is food, clothing, no matter what. In 1973, there were no set prices. Everything's a deal. You know, whether you're buying a carrot, a chicken, a pair of shoes, a jalava, one of those ropes, everything's a deal. So our buddy Mohammed, everybody, it's like Joe in the United States, he's with us, so he's saving us a lot of money. Well, the third day, and this is important because this is our third passenger on the way back, there's a wild pack of dogs, and one of these dogs took a fancy to us. I gave her a bite of the sandwich I was eating when we were on the beach. She followed me home. Next thing you know, I brought her to her vet, which was really a trip, got her all her shots, her papers. Now we have a dog. We adopted her, our third party. And we had no time frame on when to leave. And this little thing is pretty cool. There's two little parts of this story that are cool. We knew we had been there just over 4 weeks, and we knew it was almost time, but no date set. Our typical routine in the morning was we were just hanging out early, having coffee. We had these big bay windows that overlooked this gorgeous beachy, and it was just unbelievable. Hardly anybody on there, a couple of surfers. This local guy, this big old Arab guy is funny. He'd walk up and down the beach with hot donuts every day, hot donuts on a beach when it's 80 degrees. They were great donuts. So, and this one morning we're sitting there, our beloved dog Pigpen, I can tell her real name was Primo. She's sitting on the couch with Cassidy. And Stella's in one chair, I'm in another chair, kind of, the three of us. Big bay windows, high ceilings. Now, I will preface this by saying, in life how everybody has a favorite number.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. For whatever reason, my favorite number was 2. I had to think about 2. I considered it in my own head good luck. It didn't matter if anybody else believed it. I believed it. So all of a sudden, and I know this sounds like a crock. I know a lot of people are going to think, oh, this guy's making this up. It really happened. 2 white doves fly into the living room, circle the living room twice, and fly out. And it was like an omen. And once again, the hairs on my neck are sticking up. It's true, guys. And it was like an omen. That's it, nothing else. But that's it. That happened. Even Primo was sitting there, a.k.a. Pigpen in the book. She's looking at him. The three of us are looking. They flew out. We all looked at each other and said, that's the sign that we go. The next day we went. So the next day we drove because there was one more quick 2 thing. We get up to, this time, Tangiers, not Tetuan. Tetuan is over to the west. Tangiers is closer to the ocean to us, and we're going to leave from Tangiers. We get to Tangiers. Cassidy goes in, buys our 3 tickets for the ferry, and then he said, that's it, guys, I'll see you. Now he's leaving us because, once again, he's walking on the ferry pretending he doesn't know us. He had a money belt with backed up money just in case anything happened to us leaving Morocco or coming into Spain. And we go through customs. This is showtime. Now there's no turning back. I can't change my mind now. My partner in crime, Stella, 18 years old, she's sitting there like she's high on Valiums, totally chilled. She's not. She's sitting cross-legged, reading The Godfather, like we're just going through a toll, we're just going through a border check, chill. And I'm thinking to myself, how the fuck are you so cool over here? But I'm trying to get her energies, but she's, and I have to do, I'll tell you, Ian, I had to do my best. It was the biggest mental challenge of my life. I just drove the thought that I was doing anything wrong away. I just made myself feel like this isn't happening. I'm just going through the border check. We pull up. The first thing the guy says, the head guy comes up to us, very first words out of his mouth, and I think the only English words he knew was hashish, senor? Hashish, you have hashish, senor? Now, keep in mind, there's like 6-8 lanes of people, and everybody's getting the same question from who's ever searching them. This is typical. This happens all the time, every day. That's how they work. They send all the people that are walking, like Cassidy, through this one part that they get searched individually. I guess it's something like TSA. I never saw that, where they walk through and all the vehicles have to go through these slots. This guy comes up, he checks our passport, and I said, "No, senor, no." Meanwhile, like, it's part of the regular routine. They must have done it thousands of times. 5 guys come up, not violently, but they were into their job. I've got one guy flattening one of the tires randomly. One guy's looking all through the engine, as in taking part of it apart. Another guy's under the Volkswagen bus. There's a long heater hose that runs. He's taking out that to see if there's any hash in there. I got 2 guys searching the interior. We're sitting there, but he's searching all around. Primo, AKA Pigpen, does her job. He's licking, she's licking the guy. She's only, by the way, the vet told us, probably not even a year old. So she was like a pup. And she's licking the guy's hand and the whole thing, and everything's cool. They make me call her. So I called her up and put her in Stella's seat. They wanted to lift up. We had a 6-inch that we also bought, a 6-inch foam mattress on top of the bed, and we had the sheets and the blankets and the pillow. We lifted that up. They lifted that up, looked under the mattress, didn't even pay attention to the bed. They looked through the blankets. Of course, they looked behind the bamboo. We had books in that shelf. We had about 6 or 7 boxes of 8 tracks. You know, you can only fit like 8 in a box this big. So they're looking through that, everything. This goes on for 45 minutes, maybe not even, maybe a half hour, but there's 5 of them while this other guy's asking, Hashish, senor, Hashish, senor. Finally, they thoroughly went through everything. Now, keep in mind, you know, the only way they would have found that is taking a chainsaw, you know, to open it up. I don't even think a dog today could have smelled it in that. I highly doubt it. Any of you canine people out there might, you know, correct me if I'm wrong. But here's the weird part of that. They have us come through, but we're not allowed on the ferry. They make us pull over to the side. Now imagine, just went through this whole search. Everything's cool, but they're not letting us get on the ferry. And we're like, what the hell? Stella's like, relax, babe. It's, you know, whatever it is, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. And I jump to conclusions in my head. And there's one Arab guy that comes over, but he's not paying attention to us. He's standing there cross-legged, watching the goings on. Now, keep in mind, there's maybe 40 people that can get on the ferry, depending on the size of their cars. Everybody's driving on. The walkers are walking on. And I'm thinking, why are we standing here? Are they going to come and get us? Or did they call somebody else? And I'm saying, no, everything's cool. It's got to be cool. So during that time is in the book I wrote, I have a flashback to explain how I got to that position with the housekeepers and all that stuff. So the main character has a flashback. So finally, it's almost time. We're thinking, because we're supposed to leave at 2 p.m. and it's like 20 to 2. I happen to look up to the top deck. It's a sizable ferry, but not super, super big, maybe, 80, 100 feet long or something. Who's up there? Cassidy. And he's looking down at me, and I'm looking up, and I see the expression on his face, and he's all uptight, and I'm thinking, why are you making me more uptight? I just had it under control. Like, for Christ's sake, at least give me a fake smile. Do something. Don't just stand there looking worried. And I told myself, I'm not even looking at him anymore. This is not good. Finally, they say, okay, come on, you're on. You know what it was? I showed you this book. I showed you this roof. This roof was about 2.5 on the bus, 2.5 feet tall. The ferry, if you could imagine, kind of like a U-shaped, we had to be the last ones in to have enough room for the for the bus to fit in. So literally, we backed in the very last people on the ferry, meaning we're the first off in Spain, and there's only about 6 inches of room. But that was the reason. Now we're on the way over, past the Rock of Gibraltar. Oh yeah. Oh, but no, this happens after. So we're over. We decided to go up to the top deck, and we're just chilling. We leave Pigpen in the bus. She's fine. She's cool. It's nice and cool down there. and we're watching Spain get closer. And I start thinking to myself, I have a problem, Ian, where I think too much, and I shouldn't even have thought. I should have just waved to the Rock of Gibraltar. And I'm thinking to myself, if the search was that intense in Morocco, I should have never allowed this thought into my mind. I'm thinking, how's it going to be in Spain? It can't be worse, right? They know the people in Morocco, and I'm playing these mind games, and Stella's just like, she's not paying attention. She's like, it's fine, it's great. As we're standing on the rail, let's get back to the number 2. And again, I know most of your fans are going to think it's a crock, but this happened on my mother and father. This happened. We're standing over the rail, and now we're coming close. We're like maybe a mile out, mile and a half out. We see Malaga, the shore, the whole thing, as we're standing on the top. And I know that Cassidy, I think he's on the second deck. I didn't want to be anywhere near him. We look out. All of a sudden, out of the blue, 2 dolphins come jumping up. Now, this is a long ferry, but they're jumping with the boat at the same speed, right where we're looking down. They jump twice. Then they circle around the boat twice. They jump 2 more times and disappear. And Stella and I looked at each other like, yes, it was like, that's our omen. We got into Spain. We went and pulled into the thing. The guy comes over, oh, hi, the Americans, blah, blah, blah. Really friendly guy, goes back, pets the dog, looks around like this. I think he lifted up one bamboo curtain. He points to a music box. Stella hands it to him. He opens it up, and the dog, Pigpen, real name Primo, she's wagging her tail, and he's a dog guy. He's petting her. She's licking him. Everything's great. And Stella passes him one of the cassette boxes. He opens up one, and he pulls it out, and he goes, music. And she goes, perfect timing, like we rehearsed it, but we didn't. See, musical, la, 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 la. He starts laughing, looks around a little bit, shuts the door, and he goes, okay. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, like, is this cool? We're good? Sure enough, we go to the exit. The big exit side, to get out is open. And we go out, and I'm like exploding with, like, this is like the hurdle, like 75% of our hurdle is over. We made it out of Morocco. We made it into Spain. Cassidy, meanwhile, right across from the exit is a bar and cafe. He gave me strict instructions when I get out, park the bus, come in and get him. I decided at the last second, I don't like this. I don't want to be next to the custom yard. I make my own decision. There's a big hill up the road. I said to Stella, she goes, we should go inside and get him. I said, no. I want to get out of here. I drove up to the top of this hill, which you could see from there, and I parked. I figured he'll see it. You can see that if you're at a stadium, Ian, and there's 50,000 people in the parking lot, you can find this bus in 2 seconds. And we're waiting like it's an hour. And I'm like, what the hell happened? Do you think, maybe they kept him in customs? He never got out of there. Finally, I'm looking in the rear view because you can see out the back window. Then I look in the side window and I see Cassidy come walking up the hill. And I know him real well because I'm traveling. And he is pissed off. I can see the look on his face. I can almost see the steam coming out of his ears. He is pissed. And I'm thinking to myself, why is he so upset? So I came up the hill. He gets in, doesn't say a word. Leslie slides over. I drive, and in 2 minutes he explodes. What the fuck are you doing? I told you to go in there. You had me so paranoid. I thought you guys got busted. I didn't know whether to call Stella's friend, to call Stella's parents. I'm sorry, or your dad, blah, 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 blah. He didn't say anything for another 15 minutes. We rode down the road, and then my peripheral vision, I could see him look past Stella and look at me, and all of a sudden I looked at him, and we burst out laughing, and it was the best rush of our life. And the rest of the story, we made it. That was it. And the rest of our story is he stayed in the bus from then on. We drove all the way up to Rotterdam. Cassidy had a girlfriend in Amsterdam that had a flat, AKA apartment, and she said we could stay, so we decided to stay there. Had a blast in Amsterdam for a week with a dog, the whole thing. And Stella and Pigpen stayed at the flat. And Cassidy and I went to Rotterdam. We had 3 options for $600, and it would all take 6 weeks. We could go to New York, we could go to Boston, or we could go to Montreal. And we decided, we knew this beforehand, but we decided that let's go to Montreal. We thought it would just be a mellower vibe. I don't know why, pick one. We picked Montreal. But it would take 6 weeks. We stayed there a week. We all came back. We split up, stayed at our respective places. I get the call from Montreal 6 weeks later. Right at 6 weeks later. And I recruit another girlfriend of mine. This is kind of cool. And she had a 68 bus. Mine's a 69, but the measurements are pretty much the same. So I hooked her up. I was going to give her a big plaque for doing this for me, and she was gung-ho. She has the New York plates. Now, keep in mind, I still have the European plates, and we're in Canada. And that factory in Beecher Falls, the reason why I brought that up is because this is going to come into play. So we all drove up. My girlfriend that was going to do it, and of course Stella and Pigpen, who went everywhere with me. And we drive up, but we park about 2 miles away. We found this mellow little neighborhood 2 miles away from the shipyard. And I left their bus and I got a cab to the shipyard. Now I go to the shipyard and I'm telling you, Ian, this place was full of 18, like the containers on 18-wheelers. It had thousands, like yards and yards full of these containers because they're shipping stuff all over the world, come inbound, outbound. And at the way end, it took a long time to get there. There's a little office. I go into the office, show my ID. Oh, yeah, we got it for you. I get in a golf cart. And it's almost from the office, it's like a full 5-minute ride. And we're driving slowly. And I'm thinking to myself, well, at any moment, the DEA is going to come flying off the roofs or coming down on ropes or whatever. And we pull up to this container and he pulls a big ramp out and he opens the door and it was like shining. And I'm thinking, wow. And there's the bus. And I casually just walk up the ramp because, of course, I want to make sure that damn bed. And I look in the back and I got the chills again. And I see the bed and it's like untouched. I can see it's exactly how we left it 6 weeks ago in Rotterdam. So I pull out, and as I'm pulling out, I'm thinking the same shit. At any moment they're going to come out and block me off. Everything's cool. I get back to the bus. My friend it was a big girl. She's like 6'1" and pretty hefty. Her and I got that bed out of my bus and into hers in about 7 seconds. We put it in the back. I sent them through that Beecher Falls, Vermont border because I knew where I worked at Ethan Allen, Canada, New Hampshire, Vermont. I knew that people are coming back and forth on a daily basis to work at the factory or shop or whatever. Sure enough, the girls and Pigpen, the dog, got right through the New York plates like they'd just been there. They come through. Oh, we were just shopping. Yeah, come on through. Done deal. They go down to Massachusetts. I had a house back then about 40 minutes east of Boston out in the country. And they went there and Cassidy was there and my best friend Hunter was there and they were waiting for me. Well, I didn't even want to go anywhere near them. I just had this thing. I was over ridiculously safe. I went through a border in New York. Those guys knew I was up to something because here I am with a European passport. They see Morocco stamped on there. I have this little like gym bag with an extra shirt, toothbrush, toothpaste. I have nothing. And the bus doesn't have anything in the back. We even put the little cabinet in the back of our bus and there's nothing in it. What are you doing, man? They knew. And they did a search that was 3 times more thorough than the Moroccans. I mean, they really took the engine apart. They flattened 2 or 3 tires, and they had me there for like 3 hours. To their credit, and I'll give them this, they were so professional, and they knew they were doing everything was back exactly right, everything. But they ripped it. They took off a headlight, I think, and looked in the back. I mean, everything. And I'm inside thinking, and the guy keeps asking me, okay, Mr. Gussin, what are you doing? You got a Moroccan stamp. I know you're up to something. And I stuck to my rap. I said, honestly, I was going to come pick up my bus and I was going to tour Canada, but I ran out of money. And he basically said, you're full of shit without saying that. And end of story. We got back, and guess who bought most of the hash? My buddy Reuben bought most of the hash, but, connections. And there was one little problem, though. Before Reuben bought the hash, he bought it all, and we got rid of it all in about 2 weeks because I wanted to save about 7-8 pounds and break it down to half pounds, quarter pounds. But when I got back we called it the Harvard House in a tiny little town called Harvard that's still there, like no traffic lights, really cool, but high-end real estate now. Everybody has 10, 30 acres, stuff like that, and we had a great rental. When I got there, my little crew was waiting. My best friend who I live with there, the girl that drove us up there, Stella, Cassidy, of course, Pigpen, and they're waiting for me. And like, where were you? Blah, blah, blah. And so we get out the chisels and the hammers, and we get the plywood off, and this stuff is like a rock. It took us a couple hours to really get it all out. We finally get it out. And we had a couple of real clean hash pipes. Nobody smoked anything. Everything was straight. And I pull a random plaque out, get it unwrapped from the tin foil and the Ziploc baggie and the seal. And I smell it, and I went white. And Cassidy said, Gus, what's wrong? I said, it smells like glue, like the polyurethane resin. It smells like glue. It was my best friend's son, Hunter, said, relax. I already got an idea about that. So I took it. It was so soft you could, smush it with your fingers. I go, okay. So I filled 2 pipes. I said, here's the deal. Everybody just take 2 hits. That's it. No more. Everybody was straight. Nobody drank any liquor, beer. Nobody smoked anything. And I got some, pros sitting around here, smokers. We passed it around, just in a couple minutes. Everybody took 2 hits. We all sat there for about 2 minutes. And almost all at once, this was one of the best laughs I ever had in my life. We all burst out laughing. We were all stoned. It was great. It was like celebration, yeah, everything's great. Everybody loved it, and we knew it was cool. And what Hunter came up with, kudos to him. On the second floor, this was a big 2-story house. On the second floor, we started the trip in May, so it was like late April, but it was still cool. I'm sorry, we started in April, but it was mid-May, but it was still cool in Massachusetts. And what we did was we opened all the windows on the top floor, and we took the hash out plain and just literally put a piece of paper on the windowsill and just laid all the plaques. There was a lot of plaques. By the way, I was so close when we weighed it out. When we broke it up and to reel the tape back to the day we were making the bed, we were with exactly just a couple grams over 43.5 pounds. We couldn't fit that 40, the half a pound. So we smoked when we were in Morocco. Then we flushed the rest down the toilet. But, I always told Cassidy, I told you I was right. We would have to throw away 4 pounds of hash. But after about 3 days, the smell went away. And within 2 weeks, we sold it all. I know what you're waiting for the outcome. It sounds insane right now, but Cassidy made $21,500. I made $20,000, but the bus was $1,500. I wanted to keep the bus, and we gave Stella $5,000, and that was it.
Imagine if it turned out to be fake.
Oh my God!
Why didn't you guys test it out there? You're just too scared.
No, when you test it back in the old days, when you're dealing with it, all the right people know. I knew right away. You didn't have to test it. I know it's hard to think in today, 2026. Testing it, yeah, you smelt it, you smoked it, you bent it, you knew. There was no fugazi, bogus. There was no bogus material. You know what I mean? Today you could pass anything off or whatever, but interesting point you brought up. The trust factor was 100 times what it is today. In other words, you could buy mescaline or LSD excuse me, in the late 60s, even to the mid 70s, from people you didn't know in Boston or New York, in the park, and Old Greenwich, wherever. And it was a trust factor. They told you, yes, it was purple Housley. Yes, it was window pane. Yes, it was white lightning. Yes, it was LSD 25. And on and on. Yes, chocolate acid. Across the board, everybody was 99% honest.
Now, back then, if you got caught in Morocco with that hash, how much time would you have gotten?
Well, here's what we knew for sure. The answer to that question is I'm not sure. But in Spain, right over the border, we knew for a fact that it was 6 years and a day, whether you got caught with a gram or 43.5 pounds.
Oh, that's not terrible.
Yeah, not terrible, but you can imagine the conditions. Morocco, it's an interesting question that I never learned the answer to because he had the backup cash and we were still in Morocco. So technically, we were getting busted locally. I don't know if it would have become more serious because we were trying to leave Morocco, which I imagine it might have been, but I don't know the answer to that question. But here's something very funny. I don't know if you ever heard of the book or saw the old movie. It came out in 76. We did our trip in 73. The movie Midnight Express.
But I've heard it. Wasn't there a remake?
The book, I don't think there was a remake, but there was a book first, which was really good, and there was a movie, and they elaborated, and the guard got killed in the movie. He never got killed. The true story's in the book. But this kid, he was young. He was in his 20s, and his girlfriend, she didn't know anything about it. They were leaving Istanbul, and he taped like a dumbass. He taped 10 pounds of hash onto his body. When he was getting on the plane, they patted him down for bombs or explosives. And they patted him down, and when they first did, they thought he had explosives, and then they all started laughing. Then they took him to one of the worst Turkish prisons in the country, and he was there for many months. He went to court. He was sentenced to 30 years. 3-0. 3 years after in there, he escaped. I don't remember all the specifics, but he was able to escape, paying somebody off. And he got away from the prison, and Turkey's right near Greece. And somehow he got a hold of a small boat that was set up, or part of the price. His dad put out money, and he escaped, a couple of miles from Turkey on water to Greece, and wrote this book. If it was the other way around, let's say that came out in 73 and we did this trip in 76, and I heard about the movie, I read the book and watched the movie, I would have never gone to Morocco. So
you never went back again to do that?
We did. We tried to do it again 6 months later. This time, since I paid my dues, I brought two of my friends, one of them Hunter, the same guy I lived with, and another dear friend of mine. To this day, we're best friends. We've known each other since second grade. We get over there. This is only 6 months later. We're going to take a shortcut. We fly to Amsterdam. We bought the bus in Amsterdam. We're going to drive down to Tetuan, get the hash, but this time those two are going to drive through. I'm going to play the Cassidy role of walking through. I had a money belt. We buy the bus. The first thing that happens is on the way home, Hunter's driving the bus. He gets in a fender bender. This is like owning the bus for 20 minutes. Bad omen. Put a little dent in the back. Then we're going to get ready to leave. We're buying, stuff for the road. And Hunter said, I think we're being followed. I think this, I think that. He got this shit in his head, freaked our other friend out. And I knew I wasn't going to convince him, and I already paid my dues. I wasn't going to do it again, not at this point. We stayed in Amsterdam. I blew a bunch of cash going to hash houses and eating at nice restaurants. Got back. Cassidy was all pissed off that I spent all this money. And we tried one other thing. We decided that Cassidy And again, since I paid my dues, and another dear friend of ours, Stephen, Cassidy had bought a new boat. Let me preface, he used some of the money out of the 21 grand. He bought a new boat, keeping it in Montauk. And him and this other guy were going to sail to Morocco, no Coke, no Colombian, and buy like 250 pounds of hash or something and sail back. I was so excited because I knew I would be selling all the hash. I wouldn't make as much money as them because they took the risk, but I knew I'd make a small fortune selling all that hash, and I could drag it out, and sell it smaller, single pounds, 3 and 5 to make more money. But they wait just a little late in the season, the hurricane season. The round trip at the time to Morocco was a distance. I can't remember exactly. And you sailors out there, please forgive me. I think it was about 2.5 or 3 weeks, something like that, each way. But they leave late and hurricane season hits. So about 10 days or 12 days, something like that, maybe 14 days, something like that later, I get a call from Cassidy. And I'm thinking to myself, he should be in the middle of the ocean. I said, so what did you get? Some kind of miraculous tide that brought you there? I thought at first maybe he made it that quick to Morocco was more realistic, and he was calling me from Morocco. I had no idea. And he said, wait till you hear the story. We're back, blah, blah, blah. I sit down with Stephen, and Stephen, Cassidy's the sailor. He's the guy that, was doing it. Stephen was the first mate, and Stephen said he thought he was going to die. He said Cassidy was so cool under pressure. What happened was they got out and they hit some kind of wacky hurricane from wherever because they waited too late. And he literally said for 3.5 days, they had to turn around and stay below. They had I'm forgetting that there's a terminology of a piece of equipment that Cassidy had on the boat, a steering vane, I think, or something that keeps the boat on course. He said they were going through as high as 30, sometimes 40-foot waves. And Stephen said he thought he was going to die. And he said he gave a lot of credit to Cassidy because Cassidy kept his act together the whole time, actually got him back safely. They still had another 5 days after getting through the storm, and it was still really rough. He said it was miserable. And that was the final attempt of going to Morocco and getting the hash. As far as I know, I don't think Cassidy ever saw our friend over there in Morocco again. I never went over again. And, excuse me, at that time, within the next year, I had gone off to California. I lived in California on my own, and I met, some really good connections all through a Jewish guy that used to be a Shylock for one of the 5 Italian families. But I had heard, and then I caught up with him a few years later. Cassidy hooked up about a year later with an old surfing buddy of his that he knew since junior high school, and he went on to have quite a career in smuggling weed on freighters and sailboats, sometime by airplane, and he ended up writing 4 different books. He started his own publishing company in the 90s. He even got 2 of his movies. It's all in the book that I wrote. He even got 2 or 3 of his movies produced. He wrote a couple scripts for the old show Miami Vice and True Crime and stuff, and he did pretty well. And he died of unknown causes. Unfortunately, just recently, about 4 years ago, he died of I think it was 22 or 23, I think, of unknown cause. And Stephen and Stella were the ones that notified me that he had died. I had seen Cassidy a few times. He came out for my son's christening, which would have been back in the 80s. And then I think the last time I saw him was in the late 80s at Stephen's apartment in New York City. And we kind of lost touch, but he spent a lot of time driving an RV and writing, always writing after he got out of the weed business. He never crossed the line. He never went into the coke business, but when the coke business was getting really heavy duty in the 80s with the cartels and the DEA was moving in, it really scared him. So he focused on films and books and stuff. So he spent a lot of time driving his RV around Costa Rica and all around Mexico with his dog. So that's what he did, the remaining years of his life, Cassidy.
How long does your drug career go on for?
My drug career stopped. Oh, well, again, if I may show it, you got to look this up on the book in Amazon. You can get it, Gus, all the years combined. Interesting, great question. My drug career was at a highlight. This was about 1988-ish or 89, 88, 89. I wrote the book and I can't even remember which year, but that's irrelevant. Earlier, I'll give you the short version. In 75, I was back in New York. I was out in LA on my own for a year, broke, living in my car in an apartment building for a couple of weeks, living in apartments that were evicted, blah, blah, blah. Very entertaining life, up and down roller coaster. I went back east with Pigpen, my dog from Morocco. She traveled more than most human beings. I drove back in January in a 65 Volkswagen Bug, no heat, hardly any money. Went to Aspen to see my girlfriend at the time before I got together with my future wife. Stayed there a week, had to get somebody off the ride board. This Volkswagen Bug had no heat, it blew cool air. We had to, plug it up. In the back seat, I took the back seat of the Volkswagen out and I made it into a big makeshift bed for Pigpen if she wanted. We had big pillows and it was really comfortable. No back seat, but the seat itself, but no back. And the back was a big bed, but no heat or whatever. I had to get a rider off the ride board in Aspen to afford the freaking gas to drive all the way down to Fort Lauderdale to see my buddy Stella, who put me up for a week. And then I drove back up north to New York. That's where I met my ex-wife. But the trip across country, we literally made with $200 between us. The rider I got was great. He had a chunk of hash. We were smoking it. We cut out an apple and an orange. Imagine putting a hole through and out. We didn't have enough money for a hash pipe, and that's how we were smoking it. It was cold as hell. We were driving. It was sometimes in the teens, single digits. It was the coldest ride of my life, nonstop. Aspen, LA to Aspen was 24 hours, and then Aspen down to Fort Lauderdale was a long time. It was, 36, 40 hours, something like that straight because we couldn't stop for a hotel. It was certainly too cold to sleep on the side of the road. I had a few pieces of stolen jewelry that I sold that I got from this girl in LA who used to max out people's credit cards. That's another story, again, in the book. So I sold to Stella's friend some pieces of turquoise. That's how I got enough money to get back up to New York. I got together with my future wife. She was single in Aspen, ironically, Aspen, with the same crew that I knew later. We got together, left in 75 of August. That's when it was the foundation of my drug career. We drove out to Tucson, cross country with our two dogs, Pigpen, and she had a big German Shepherd named Moose. He was a real funny piece of work. They were best friends. Our first stop was Tucson. We were going to Laguna Beach. And in Tucson, we ended up staying for a year, but about 3 of those months, were living with her second oldest sister. She had 3 sisters. Her sister was going out with my future partner, Dupree. Dupree at the time was running weed. He was well in demand. His deal that he would run weed anywhere, usually from California to Arizona. Usually he'd run between 1,500 and 2,000 pounds, getting paid between $10 and $20 a pound. He was making great money. He was that special guy that, in fact, it's right in the prologue of this book. He was that special guy that could keep it 3 or 4 miles above the speedometer and drive all day without getting, and if he got pulled over, he could keep his shit together. He was that rare breed, very much in demand. I wanted that driving job. It would take me several years to get it. I worked my butt off. It was my first. Oh, I'm sorry. This was a job that I had for 10 months. My third real job, working as a server at Red Lobster, for one of the first Red Lobsters in Arizona. And Dupree, this is the kind of guy he is. He paid me $10 to dress up in my Red Lobster outfit before I started and serve him a cup of coffee. That's the kind of guy he is. After our stint in Tucson, we went to Laguna. That's when my drug career really took off, because I had a friend. The friend was a Shylock. He did booking, lending money out for one of the 5 main families in New York. But since he was Jewish, he was never going to be a part of the family. He had a whole experience on his own, but he asked for permission. He moved out to Laguna Beach. It was touch and go for a while, because a couple of years earlier he had to move out, and he didn't tell anybody he was moving. These guys showed up at his house. They brought him back to New York. He had to have a sit down with the Don and the whole thing. Everything was cool. And he moved out to Laguna Beach. But that's a whole fun story in the little chapter in the book that's a lot of fun. And I said to him, Jack Straw is his name in the book. Jack, I can't, I don't have any contacts. You're the only person I know out there. And this is how tight we were. We had met in LA when I was on my own through Steven's father, who was good friends with Jack. And Jack and I hit it off and became very close. And he wanted my ex-wife, Althea, and I to move out. He wanted us to move out and be close to him. So he literally got us a condo, put out the cash, the deposit, the first and last, whatever, in Laguna Niguel, actually. And he said, don't worry about it. I said, but I have no way to make an income. Don't worry about it. I went out there complete on, and this is how it was back then, complete trust. He said, I got the people that I can put you with. You'll make a great living selling weed. Now imagine trusting somebody today to do that. You'd be so sketchy. Who is this guy? Whatever. But life was a different world back then, Ian. And I went out there, and I'm not a condo guy. I'm not an apartment guy. But it was a quaint little condo village in Laguna Niguel. And keep in mind, this was like 1976 now. And it was, Laguna Niguel was a sleepy little town. And we were on the end. There was maybe 5 streets with about 6 or 8 condos on each street. A little like condo community, but really low key. It didn't have the vibe like today. And out our porch, there was all fields. There was pastures. We could see horses and cows in Laguna Niguel. Can you imagine? And he introduced me to some of the best contacts I ever had in my life. And that comes up on my best all-time contact, aside from Dupree, Cowboy Neil. Cowboy Neil trusted Jack. I trusted Jack. Cowboy Neil and I never met. He was a bartender from Boston. He came out, and he was a big, big guy. His boss was running thousands of pounds from freighters, into Florida back in the day on the Donzies, the go-fast boats. And about a month after meeting Cowboy Neil, I found out, this is how tight we got that fast. His wife, it didn't hurt that his wife got along well with Althea, my girlfriend's soon-to-be wife at the time. We got married in 1978. And he took me over to one of his stash houses. He had his house that him and his girlfriend lived in, 3 stash houses around the Laguna Beach, Laguna Niguel area. And when I walked in, literally, except for the hall and 1 bedroom, he had 1 person that lived. They switched shifts. And my, one guy would have a bedroom and kitchen and access to the bathroom. The rest of the house was wall-to-wall weed, wall-to-wall. The other bedrooms, whether it was 2 or 3 other bedrooms, I'm talking wall-to-wall, like with little aisles in it that you had to go through. And he just said, literally, take whatever you want, write it down on the thing, bring me back the money. And slowly but surely, through Jack and some other people he introduced me to, I met a couple other contacts. My sister moved out in a couple of years, and she dated this guy that ended up being a good contact. And the more and more and more and more it grew, and then we moved to San Diego. So within 4 or 5 years, I had some great contacts. I had the lower end. I had some, stony surfer guys that were selling all, like 3 to 10 pounds at a time. And I had Dupree and his crew that were buying 800 to 1,000 pounds. But to show you how competitive the business was, is sometimes if somebody's buying 1,000 pounds, you'd think you'd make a fortune. Sometimes Dupree and I had to go all the way down to $15. In other words, $7.50 each per pound to get the deal done, because the market it wasn't like his guys were trying to, get us down and give us a hard time. The market was so competitive. Usually we made between 10 and 20 bucks a pound, but when you're selling 800 to 1,200 pounds, it adds up quick. And that's when things really started taking off. We formed a partnership in the mid-'80s, and it went strong for about 4.5 years. Before that, I was doing well, but not this well. And how it worked is we moved to Northern California. That's where I love North County, San Diego. And I had it was a rental house, but it was a gorgeous house, 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a pool, jacuzzi, in the avocado capital of the world, Fallbrook. So you could see we were on 3 acres, but it looked like 50 acres. And there was spotted houses around in the hills, but everybody had between 5 and 20 acres kind of thing. Camp Pendleton, you could see to the west, so the beach was 20 minutes away. And Big Bear, where you could go snow skiing, was an hour and 10 minutes away. And typically how it would work is Dupree and I would get there. Cowboy Neil would come in and he'd drop all the weed off, like 1,000 pounds. He'd back into the garage, drop the weed off, and he'd leave. Get back to me later. He'd, literally front me, because we had that kind of trust. It's a lot of money, because the weed, got up there, some of these deals, cash-wise, anywhere from 700 to $1 million in cash. And then what happened is we had meat scales, so we'd weigh it up exactly. Then Shep's buyers would come in, and typically a buyer would come in, but that buyer might have 2 or 3 or 4 drivers. So once the deal, there was that one scary part where for about an hour, counting the money with a money machine and weighing up the weed with a weed, for about an hour, we had both the weed and the money in the same place. And I might preface this for all you family guys out there. I only did this, and I never broke precedence when Althea would take my 2 kids, because my 2 kids out there were like 4 and 2 and 5 and 3, when they were out of town. So they'd leave for the weekend and, on some vacation or someplace close by, but they were never around. And once we had it weighed up and the cash was all done, what would happen is one driver would come in. I had the unique thing. It was a neighborhood, very hilly, so there was no traffic, and my driveway went straight down. It was like a 90-degree drop. My neighbors were cool. He was also my golf partner, but the house was secluded. The angles was perfect. Nobody could see what was going on. One driver would come in, back into the garage, and let's say we were doing 1,000 pounds to make the math easy. He'd take 250 pounds, and he'd go to Detroit. He'd get on the road, out of sight. He didn't know who the other drivers were. They didn't know him. Another driver would come, same thing. He might go to Boston. Next guy, Chicago. One time it was really funny because there was one driver, and on the way out, I looked out the window, and I see this girl driving. She's one of the drivers. And I asked Franklin, my contact, or the weed guy who's buying the weed. I said, Franklin, who is that girl? And sure enough, it was Scarlett. It was a girl that I dated for a year when I was living in LA by myself. And here we are, like all these years later in the 80s, we were dating when I was out there in 74. Small world, and she's driving for this guy. I ended up seeing her again, but not for another 12 years. But that was the gist of it. And once it broke up, Franklin was one of several people that came. There was three big guys, really, three or four. And he'd take us out to dinner, and our job was, he goes, I want you to see how much you can get the bill up. That was his game. So he'd order expensive bottles of wine and champagne, and everything was going great. Everything. And we sat down like businessmen, Dupree and I, and we had a 2-year plan. We had a tie situation, tie bud. We did a couple other deals. Again, one more time in the book, but I'm shortening the book, Gus All the Years in Time, if you don't mind me saying that.
Well,
again.
that gets people to buy the book.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. It's on Amazon. Gus All the Years Combined. Very entertaining.
We'll have the link in the description for everyone, too.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. But this is what happened right before the end of my career, or what I thought was the end of my career. Everything's going great, Ian, and we sat down and we made a plan. This is when the tie bud started to come for fruition. Always have trouble saying that word. Before that, by the way, I might specify that those weed deals, 1,800 pounds, 90% of those were high-grade Mexican, like Michoacan and several other types of Mexicans. A couple of times we did what used to be called Colombian gold wheels, but most of it was Mexican, sometimes Colombian. Then all of a sudden, I learned through Dupree and these guys, Franklin and a couple other guys, they had a big market for the untied tie bud. When I say untied, back then, 70s, 80s, from Thailand, there was two different kinds of weed. There was Thai stick, which everybody heard about coming out of that movie Up in Smoke. But I never was a fan of Thai stick because you're literally, even though the stick's light, you're paying for the damn stick. If you buy 500 pounds or 1,000 pounds, that's a lot of stick. And the real strong stuff, really potent, I mean, I'm talking a couple of hits, was the untied Thai buds. And it turns out that Cowboy Neil's boss, he had one boss, the head of the thing, he had an in on this in Thailand. He also had a 165-foot schooner, so he started bringing this stuff in from Thailand. I had the opportunity to be a runner before this, but I didn't take it because of my kids. Right before this happened, Neil, who Cowboy Neil became very trustworthy with, I might throw this out there, he offered me the job of going down to Florida. You got to do it 11 nights in a row. Take a go-fast boat, a Donzi or a Scarab, 90 miles out, offload weed a couple of times till you got 2 or 3 loads and bring it inbound. But you had to work because it was so the loads were humongous. You had to work 11 nights in a row. Each night, these people were getting 40 grand in cash. Now, I'm talking late 70s here. So after 11 nights, 440,000. If I was single, Ian, I would have done it. But since I had a wife and 2 kids, I just couldn't pull the trigger. I didn't do it. Sometimes I regret not just getting it over with and doing it. Yeah. But I wanted to throw that in. But these guys were bringing it in from a schooner. And here I am. The guy that's bringing it in goes to Cowboy Neil. I'm the next one. So I was getting this weed that on the street was selling for $2,000 to $3,000 a pound, $2,200, $2,400, $2,600. Even the high buyers, it was rare that buyers were able to pay less than $1,600, $1,700, $800 a pound. Cowboy Neil was making a fortune. My guess was he was getting it for $1,000 a pound. $1,200 a pound. And he sold it to me and my partner Dupree for $1,400. So we're making a good $100 each. And we're selling it to our guys who couldn't get it for less than 18 or 19 at the time, even buying a lot of weed. We were giving it to them for $1,600. We had some of the best prices in the area, if not the country. And these guys came down. This is quite the story, and I'll keep it short. They came down for 100 pounds. There was Franklin and Uncle John. and Uncle John was a character. These two great people. We did it. We did 4 years of work with them. Middling. Totally trusted them. The deal is that both of them, they had a lot of contacts in Sacramento area and Fresno and Northern California. So this was perfect. I was in North County, San Diego, and so that's just right up the road. Their drivers don't have to drive across the country, they say, in the same state. So the whole scene was ideal. So they came down. They got a hotel in Laguna, and Dupree came down a day early. And I got to preface this by saying they were so excited to buy it, they thought that I would consider doing it early. I told them, I said, Althea and the kids are not going out of town till early Saturday morning. I cannot do it till they leave, but we can do this as early as 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. They came down on Thursday because they thought I might break precedence and do it Thursday night or Friday, and I was adamant I wasn't going to do that. We had done one deal at a hotel in San Francisco. This was, 6 months earlier, and we all said no more hotels. This is ridiculous. We had 3 hotels, a bunch of weed. It was absurd. I said, you don't want to do the hotel, and they were both adamant and said no. I said, you got to respect my wishes. So they got a hotel, and they were cool. That's important. So the morning of Saturday morning, Dupree and I drive up there. At the time, I got rid of my beloved 78 911 SC Porsche that I love, and I still cry to this day because the wifey, Althea, made me get rid of that. And in place, I bought a lame Volvo for her because of the safety conditions, the kids, the vibe. And I got myself a Chevy Silverado truck, really nice truck, two-tone, the whole silver and blue with red stripes. And it's a funny thing. When I used to drive the Porsche, I used to have women hold up their phone numbers and wave, and driving the truck, nobody paid attention. But that's the difference between the cars. So at any rate, we go to their hotel room. And the plan is they're going to come down and get in their car. Dupree and I are in the Volvo. We're going to drive just a few miles away. Uncle John wanted to run into the liquor store for smokes and something else. And there was a McDonald's just close by where they had payphones. Back in those days, by the way, we used to carry around rolls a quarter. That was the thing. Nobody talked from their house. And I was going to call Cowboy Neil, excuse me, who was up on the hill in one of his stash houses. This was only for 100 pounds, only 100 pounds. But Dupree and I were going to make 10 grand. We were making 200 bucks off 100 pounds, which was sweet, nice little, this was the start of the season and everything. But we were going to bring them up. Cowboy Neil was cool. He was going to meet my guys and everything, but there was respect there and everything, but they never did get a chance to meet, unfortunately. So that was the plan. But getting back to the parking lot, a few minutes away from where we were going, when they came out, Uncle John was really cool. And he said, Gus, I got a present for you. So he pulls out this Halliburton suitcase. Now, it's not in the box, but it's brand new. It even has kind of like the plastic around. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Right up your alley. Like a nice suitcase, but it's thicker. And the material's like alloy. You can run a car over this thing. And really nice leather interior with blue crushed velvet. Really nice. I have no idea to this day whatever happened to that. I really miss it. But it's an important part of the story. So he hands me this Halliburton. He goes, Gus, this is just a gift. And I was kind of blown away because even back then I knew these things cost a couple $100. And I was like, thank you. That's really nice of you guys. It's awesome. And I put it in the trunk, and not in the trunk, just in the backseat of the Volvo. So we drive, but that's very important because there was extra eyes on us that we didn't know about. We drive over to this McDonald's, and it's like a little shopping plaza. We didn't pick McDonald's. You know my history with that. And what's his name? Uncle John goes into the liquor store in his car, and his buddy Franklin comes with Dupree and I. I mean, literally, it's like, from where your studio is here now, imagine like 100 yards down the road, there's a McDonald's and there's payphones outside. And we pull out down there and the three of us get out, Dupree and Franklin and myself. I got to call Cowboy Neil, give him a heads up. Hey, we're all on our way up there. He knew it was coming, blah, blah, blah. We go into McDonald's because Franklin wanted a coffee and I think Dupree wanted a coffee, and I figured I'd get a coffee. A rare exception. I'll drink the coffee. So we go in, we get our coffees, we come out. It was Dupree that eagle-eyed this scene where Uncle John had parked. He had parked in front of a liquor store. We look over, and what we see is like, WTF, are you serious? Uncle John has his hands on the hood of the car, and there's like all these guys around him. What made the scene so surreal is the dudes standing around him have long hair, beards, tank tops. At first, we thought they were like, a biker group. I thought they were the Angels or the Mongols or, one of the biker groups. That's what they look like. And they all looked, they were dressed to the nines, like looking the part, big. And some of them had the tats, the whole thing. And Dupree said, I'll meet you at the cafe in Laguna where we ate yesterday. He vanishes. Very smart. To this day, I don't know how he got out of there. I told Franklin, who's with me, I said, you walk that way. I got to call Cowboy Neil. At this point, I'm not that worried because I didn't think they put us together. Little did I know. I go to the payphone. I call Cowboy Neil. Rings 3 times. Cowboy Neil gets on the phone. Hello? Yeah, I hear him say hello. And right at that point, I remember this like it's yesterday. I couldn't tell you what I had for dinner last night, but I remember this like it was yesterday. I'm staring at this badge, speechless, with a phone in my hand, gold badge, blue DEA letters, and a voice telling me, drop the phone. I just drop it, and I could kind of hear in the background, Cowboy Neil, hello. I think he said it once or twice. He brings me over. I don't even think he hung up the phone, actually. I don't think he hung up but he didn't give a shit who was on the phone. That started, Ian, like this 3-hour freaking interview, interrogation, harassment, whatever you want to call it, in the parking lot of McDonald's. They bring Uncle John over, and there's 9 of them. Now, here's the other completely bizarre part of the story. All these guys have like the cheapest little like Pintos and these other Hearst rental cars or Avis rental cars. And it was like, this is so bizarre, but they also had very real DEA badges. But they're all in rental cars dressed like bikers. Why would you dress like that and drive this like weird rental car, But I wasn't that concerned about what I was watching. I was concerned about what was happening. So now, within 10 minutes, the Orange County police come, or Laguna Beach police, whatever. I think it was Orange County. I think we were closer to them. They put yellow tape around. Now imagine 10:30, 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Beautiful day out, gorgeous freaking day, crystal clear skies, puffy, California, perfect, blah, blah, blah. And these guys are like 3 on Uncle John, 3 on Franklin, 3 on me. They got us separated by enough that we can't hear each other, like this triangle. They keep switching around, different guys, different stories. Good guy, good guy, bad guy, good cop, bad guy, blah, 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 blah. 3 freaking hours, even more. And we stuck to the same shit. Uncle John has been doing this since 69. Dupree has been driving since 69. This is like almost 20 years later. These guys had their shit together. They had it down. He had a business, a legitimate business, so he could show, because keep in mind, he's got all this cash. He has 160 grand to buy 100 pounds. And so we talked about this beforehand. Franklin just came down with him, and I was theoretically showing him different boats because I had a lot of contacts in San Diego. He was coming down to look at boats. They knew we were absolutely full of shit. They knew that these guys were lying through their teeth, but they were still adamant, and they were still thought they were going to bust us. That was the weird thing. The vibe was that they had something on us. We knew we were all clean. You know, I had probably a few hundred on me as usual. He had the 160, but he could prove that. They didn't even take that, as a matter of fact, because he could prove that. He had business cards, the whole thing. Franklin, I'm sure, had $1,000 on him, but they didn't take that. But we didn't have a roach. We didn't have any drugs in their car or the Volvo. And finally, like 2.5, 3 hours into this nonsense, the head guy that told me, I figured it after, he was the head guy, he said, "Can I search your car?" He saved the best, what he thought, for last. And I knew that he could go get a warrant and stuff. I said, "Sure, search the car." The 2 kids' seats are in. And, you know, Althea always kept like the wipes, the baby wipes, the this, to that, you know. But it was clean. I knew it was clean. Go ahead and search it. He didn't search the car. He went right to the back seat and grabbed the Halliburton and opened it. And I was watching him, and there was 2 or 3 of the other agents with him. And when they opened the Halliburton, I could see the expression on their face, like, "Oh no, we blew it." And I'll tell you why in a second, they thought that we had already done a cocaine deal. They thought, this is my theory, and this is also, you know, Dupree's and Franklin and Uncle John's theory. They thought when they handed me off the suitcase at the hotel, they thought probably Dupree and I were getting the coke from Franklin and Uncle John. But we were taking them to get a 100-pound sample of weed. Here's the sad part. We were going to go up. I knew they were going to take the weed because I knew how good it was. I had already given them a sample. The whole thing would have taken, 20 minutes to weigh out 100 pounds and, do the cash. The deal was, this is the saddest part of the story, in 2 weeks they were going up to San Francisco and Fresno and San Rafael. They had contacts all around that area. They told me, and when they said a number, it wasn't a bullshit number. They said, if this works out well, we're going to be back in about 10 to 12 days. We're going to buy 2,000 pounds. And we had it set up. And Dupree and I thought, we're going to make $100 on 2,000 pounds. And we had our business plan getting back to that. We do 5 or 6 of these deals. We'll make $2 million each over, the next 2 years, and we'll retire. That was the plan. That didn't happen. So they search and they continue. And now it's kind of finally starting to die down because they don't have shit. And finally, about at the 3-hour mark, they were letting us go. We knew it was over. Oh, and by the way, can you imagine, Plaza? I left out the fun part. There must have been 150, 200 shoppers standing around outside the tape watching this whole show. Thank God there wasn't social media. We would have been all over the place. Could you imagine if people had phones on their camera and stuff back then, back in the 80s, right? Late 80s. And he came over, Ian, and I'll admit it, maybe I'm a wuss or whatever. This dude basically scared me straight. This head guy said, Gus, they called me Mr. The real name, my son and I, copyright, so it's nothing I'm really hiding. But they said, we know about your buddies up in Colorado. I made it a different name in the book because some of the people still might be living there. A well-known ski resort town. He goes, we know about your buddies up there in Colorado. We know about your friend down in Mexico. One of my other, just to shorten this, I had a great weed dealer down in Mexico, his whole family used to bring weed in and concealed in oil tankers, and their relatives and friends worked at the border crossing coming to San Diego. So if it wasn't Cowboy Neil, I got a lot of the weed from this other thing, but I didn't want to drag out. Same principle. But he said, we know about your friends in Mexico. Fortunately, they didn't say Cowboy Neil in Laguna, because I would have to run right over. But he said Colorado and he said Mexico. He goes, I would highly recommend that you move out of the state of California, because something to the effect of, we didn't get you now, but I'm going to keep an eye on your ass. And I took it to heart, Ian. I took it to heart. So for the next 6 months, I looked all around and blah, blah, blah. And because I knew with all the contacts, keep in mind, from the day that Althea and I arrived in Laguna Beach, I made the majority of my money selling weed. There was a couple of good hash deals.
How much do you think you made overall?
Overall?
Yeah.
You mean 37 years worth?
Yeah.
Well, please forgive me, JP and Arliss, my kids, and my ex-wife. I'd say, I must have tipped the scales at least $3 million. I would be conservative.
And you were filing taxes on that?
Well, I was filing taxes like for $20,000. Like when I had the limousine company.
Oh, once you hit the 2000s?
Yeah, when I had, before that in, no, not the 2000s, in the late 70s.
Okay.
So in other words, I didn't really worry about taxes, honestly, till the late 70s. I kind of ignored them, I guess is the only word
You're a
to
hippie.
use. But yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, I really didn't, because I didn't really work that much. I can't remember paying too many taxes in the 70s, definitely none in the 60s, other than the antique shop and McDonald's. But in 78, I started the limousine company. I mean, give me some credit. Oh, yeah. I worked at Red Lobster for a year, so I filed taxes. I filed taxes in 75. Not that bad. I taught tennis on the side. I taught golf on the side, but I didn't file taxes. But I didn't make a lot doing that. But in the limousine business, legitimately, I made probably $22,000 to $24,000 a year, and I paid all the taxes on that. And the metal cutting tool business, about the same. I created my own metal cutting tool business because Stephen, who had been doing that since the 70s, was getting really good metal cutting tools from Europe, mostly Germany, and he got me involved in that business. And I had a whole clientele in California. I was going into machine shops, and it was like, hey, this is cool. I can sell this shit. We even went to Vegas a couple times for trade shows. But while we're on the taxes, you know what the worst thing, and this is advice I'll give you and a lot of your listeners, you know what nobody did for me in my life?
What?
When I was in my 30s and 40s and even 50s, even, legitimately, but really in my 20s, 30s, and 40s, nobody came up to me and said, Gus, listen to me. Listen to me, focus. When you are 65, I know you don't even think you're going to make it till then, but you probably will. You're going to depend on Social Security. And if you don't pay more money on taxes, your Social Security is going to be crap. And guess what? It's crap. I get less than $1,000 because I didn't file for enough taxes. And Ian, there was definitely, you know how they take your best, well, what they do is they take your best 20 years or 15 or 20. But I could have easily for 15 years paid taxes on, say, even 100 grand or 120 or 150 or whatever, and ended up getting, $2,000 to $3,000 a month in Social Security instead of squadoosh, barely $900. Yeah, maybe I could live in Thailand or something, but that's not going to cut it in the States. That's why at 73 years old, I'm still working my butt off and living week to week because I screwed up. Nobody ever did that. I wish somebody did.
So the DEA gives you the advice to leave California. Do you end up leaving?
Actually, I do. It takes a while because we have no idea where we're going to be. We love California. We were there almost 20 years. I was there even the extra year before I was with Althea. And I am heartbroken about leaving. I don't want to leave. But the one thing I do know, Ian, I got to be honest, I knew that if I stayed in that area, in other words, south of LA, San Diego, or whatever, I had so many contacts that I wouldn't have been able to hold down a job because as soon as I got frustrated, I'd pick up the phone and call somebody. So I knew that wasn't going to work. We did take one RV trip with the kids all the way north to a little town called Anchor Bay. That is about a 5-hour drive from San Francisco north through Mendocino County. And as it turned out, we went up there in the foggy season to check it out. We could have bought inexpensive property right across from the beach. The cost of living was inexpensive. And check this out, they even had an opening for deputy sheriff. So I could have been an official Barney freaking Fife up in Anchor Bay, but the fog up there is 24/7, 3.5 months a year. And it was so depressing that even if you were on the moon, if you were right there and the beach was 20 yards, 30 yards away, you couldn't even see it. So we came back down, checked out Massachusetts, too cold, couldn't do Boston, couldn't do the country. New York wasn't realistic. And both our parents, Althea's parents, were already retired in Florida, South Florida. My dad was in Smyrna, right outside of Atlanta. We weren't seeing enough of them because of the cross-country flight was time. So that's how we ended up in Florida. It was absolutely depressing. Lived in Coral Springs, worked all that area, bartending, waiting, worked outside on a golf course, just was miserable. But Nina's parents lived in a quaint little beach village. We used to visit them. It was about 2 hours away. We ended up moving up there, got a lot more comfortable, and everything was going along pretty good. I got a pretty good job as a server at a privately owned restaurant, not corporate.
No more Red Lobster.
No more Red Lobster, no more rules, uniforms. This was privately owned. In fact, I ended up being tennis doubles partners with the owners, so I kind of had an in. And the one night that I was in the weeds serving tables, and this guy got me so pissed off, him and his family, that I literally threatened to put a bowl of red pasta sauce in his lap if he didn't stop barking out orders each time I passed his table. The owner wasn't real pleased with that, but he didn't want to lose a good doubles partner, so I got away with that, and all well and good. Got into the insurance business, the senior market. I did pretty well with that for 4 or 5 years. I saved some money, made some money, and then I got into the vacation business. I had contracts with Ramada and Radisson. In short, we were selling vacation packages, and they were selling to 1 out of every 8 families that took these vacation packages had to tour for timeshares. That's how they made their money. And it was very successful. Ian, I thought I was going to retire in 5 years of the business. I had 42 salespeople, a general manager, Althea, who was my ex-wifey at that time, but we were still tight. She was doing the books, prepping for the accountant. Everything was going great. Then they got greedy. Radisson, Ramada, they added on literally 46, 48 offices in about a 6-month period. There was only 14 of us, 14 offices, and there were plenty of leads. That's a key to this business, to get your phone to ring. So our 14 sales offices for the first 4.5 years were doing great. I was always number 1 or 2 for sales. And then the bottom fell out. I made the biggest mistake in business. I hung around for an extra year trying to turn this thing around, buying my own leads at $3, $4 a lead when you need a couple thousand a week to keep the salespeople busy. I was doing outbound calls instead of inbound calls. Long story short, the business went under, and I was screwed. I lost quite a bunch of money, a small fortune, a few $100,000. I was almost broke, and with my last $12,000, $13,000, I made a mistake. And this is where we're going to end it, because what I did was out of stupidity, out of desperation, I went back to my old habits, and I got back involved with the weed business. But if you guys want to know what happened after that, you are just going to have to buy this book and check it out. But fun stuff, little jail time involved, and my whole world went upside down, inside out, and that's it.
You lived such an incredible life.
Very different. I wouldn't change many things, but the one thing I would change is, damn, I should have put something away for when I was in my 70s. I work outside on a golf course. I'm in good shape, but yeah, I'm getting tired of this work crap. I would like to retire.
Do you think that's the most important, lesson you want to share with the audience? I specifically am curious. I always like asking people that are so much older and have lived so much life, like my father, who's in his 80s, and you said you're in your 70s now. Is that the biggest life lesson?
I can sum it up in one word, Ian. One word. And the reality of this is it didn't even bother me till recently. I'm 73, but I started thinking about it heavily at 65, 66, once Social Security, Medicare, by the way, is awesome, but once that stuff kicked in, and the one word, the one bit of advice I would tell all you folks out there, male and female, whether you're in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s, not too late, prepare. Because guess what, guys? Any way you cut it, these days, this world, you need the dinero, you need the funds, you need to have extra money. And it's not a whole lot of fun getting paid by the hour when you're in your 70s. I mean, I work with good people, no complaints, because I've only myself. I ended up in this situation because of the mistakes I made. But early on, prepare. And when you prepare, stick to your guns.
Well, Scott, I appreciate you taking the time to come out here for such an entertaining interview. Really great
fun.
Storyteller. And hopefully the audience goes by the book. And
Thank you. I appreciate that. Should I show the book
to the
folks out there?
We'll put it up on screen too. But
that's awesome.
Yeah.
And by the way, Gus, all the years combined, check it out. Everything in here happened exactly as it was written. The one thing I will tell all you writers out there, if you ever decide to write a book, put aside 10 years, because I think I could write a book on what happens after you write a book. It's pretty interesting.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Scott.
Okay, my pleasure, Ian. Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed it.